American TV series, starting to profit from young Sheldon. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 101, Coach George's Trouble. Breakfast time at Grandma Connie's house. Mike, there's another letter for you. Grandma Connie came in from the door, holding a beautiful envelope in addition to the monthly bill. Which school is it from again? Mike, who was eating a breakfast sandwich, asked casually. Now, a week has passed since Melford's last football game. Due to Mike's outstanding performance in the summer league, many schools' football teams have extended olive branches to him during this period. Among these schools, there are some private high schools with very high rankings. However, Mike, who did not plan to continue his studies in football, refused those invitations. Moreover, he had just become familiar with Melford's campus life and did not plan to transfer again in high school. This time it's Greenhill College. Grandma Connie glanced at the signature on the envelope and replied, "Greenhill." Mike muttered, and then reacted, "Didn't they send me an invitation last time? Why are you coming again?" Greenhill College is a very good private high school, and its comprehensive strength is probably ranked in the top 10 in Texas. "I don't know, let me take a look," Grandma Connie said, opening the letter skillfully. In the past, when Mike was too lazy to read the letter, this task was given to Grandma Connie. Oh. After reading the letter, Grandma Connie smiled and said, "This time it's their school's basketball team that sent you an invitation." In American high school, there are often people who can't play football and choose to switch to the school's basketball team. After all, these people's physical fitness is there, and they only need a little training to adapt to the confrontation on the basketball court. Obviously, this time the basketball coach of Greenhill College took a fancy to Mike's physical fitness. The basketball team is not interested. "Please help me deal with the letter," Mike said as he walked out, after eating his sandwich. "Got it." Grandma Connie looked at the back of the other party leaving and agreed. On Mike's side, after going out, he happened to meet George, who was about to drive to school. "Hey, Mike. Get in the car," Coach George shouted, and it can be seen that he has been in a good mood recently. This is indeed the case. The school has clearly stated that it intends to continue to increase Coach George's salary. So now, he is in a state of high spirits. The car moved forward steadily. In the back seat, George seemed to be still asleep and kept dozing off. Sheldon, who was reading the 12th grade study materials in the front seat, took advantage of a traffic light at an intersection and suddenly turned back. "Mike, I won't lose to you in the next exam." "Well, come on," Mike encouraged him again. Then, he also found a comfortable position in the back seat and took a nap. Mike also knew that Sheldon had started to study the 12th grade textbooks recently. However, he was not afraid of the challenge of the other party because he had enough experience. Seeing Mike's indifferent look, Sheldon muttered unhappily, "I will definitely take the first place in the next test." In other aspects, Sheldon might be more generous, but he had an almost extreme obsession with testing IQ. After arriving at school, Mike got through the morning cultural courses as usual. Then, at lunchtime, he walked to the school cafeteria surrounded by a group of girls. After a period of adaptation, Mike has basically gotten used to being very popular among girls in school. Of course, this is also due to Lina. The girls surrounding Mike at this moment are all members of Mike's fan club. Although they are also very enthusiastic, they will never affect Mike's personal life. In the cafeteria, Regina, who was sitting in the middle seat, saw Mike surrounded by a group of girls and went to the back seat again. The ignored queen bee sneered unhappily. Facts have proved that Regina's judgment was wrong last time. Even if Mike lost the aura of the football team's winning streak, he still attracted the girls in the school with his handsome appearance. As for Mike, after enjoying lunch with Lina and others, he staggered towards the football field. Today is the time for him to apply to Coach George to withdraw from the team. "Mike, it's bad." George was called away. On the playground, little George ran over as soon as he saw Mike appear. "Called away? What's going on?" Mike was a little confused. It was all because of George's current state. He was a little too excited. The team sponsors have met with George. George explained. Although Melford is a public school, due to funding issues, some projects that require more training equipment still need the support of sponsors. What's wrong with the sponsors? Isn't the school going to give Coach George a raise? Mike became more and more confused. Check out the correct version on 16,191 book 1 bar. Logically speaking, the football team's performance this year is good. Even if the sponsors come to him, there is no need to be as excited as George. Looking at the other party's current expression, if you don't know, you might think that Coach George is in big trouble. You don't understand. Those sponsors don't know what's wrong with them. They are going to remove George from his position as head coach. George said. What? There is also this matter. You lead the way. Let's go and see. Mike frowned. Mike thought that Coach George's teaching level is not low, and he is definitely capable of being the head coach of the school. What's more, the team's performance this year is good, and there is no reason for those sponsors to target him. After a while, under the guidance of George, the two came to the school's large conference room. Coach George, this year, because you didn't do your job well, the team lost the chance to compete for the state championship. Mike heard a familiar voice when he arrived at the door. If he guessed correctly, the person who spoke was Sam's father, Gretel. Somehow, this guy got mixed up in the sponsors team. Why didn't I do my job well? Coach George was now on the podium at the front, with an irritated look on his face. George, who was waiting for a pay raise, was suddenly asked to talk to the sponsor. Moreover, Gretel, who had some friction with him last time, started to accuse him arrogantly. As far as I know, before the last game, you didn't collect any information about the opponent. And during the game, you let someone who had never been a quarterback lead the team. Greet seemed to have been prepared. He continued, also, the team's wide receiver is your son. Everyone has seen his poor performance on the court. I admit that I didn't seriously collect information about the opponent before the game, which was my fault. But on the court, I know how to use the players. I dare say that I'm more professional than you. Coach George was very dissatisfied with the opponent's finger pointing. He continued, moreover, the team's performance is the result of the joint efforts of all the team members. Even if we lose, we can't just blame a certain player. Coach George made a special explanation to protect his eldest son. Why do you still want to shirk responsibility? Greet said in embarrassment. Do you really think that the loss is the fault of all the players? That's a fact. Coach George answered affirmatively. The overall strength of the Melford football team is not strong. If it weren't for Mike and Aaron, the team might not even get a spot in the top 10 in the state. The last game against Austin High School exposed the shortcomings of the entire Melford team. Chapter 102 Debate. Everyone heard it. As a coach, he actually blamed the players for the loss. He was disgusted that our children were not good enough. Greet took the opportunity to misinterpret Coach George's meaning. Almost all the sponsors sitting below had children playing in the team. At this moment, hearing Greet's provocation, they all pointed their fingers at George. As a parent, who would want to admit that their children are not good enough? Looking at the excited people below, Coach George quickly explained, I didn't say your children are not good enough. In fact, they have worked hard enough this year. I want to say that they could have been better. In fact, Coach George had also imagined that if there were more talented players like Mike in the team, it would be easier for the team to get good results. In the sport of rugby, sometimes strong talent is indeed more useful than hard work. And now there are really few talented people in the Melford rugby team. A good cook cannot cook without rice. Given the current situation of the Melford rugby team, it is obviously a bit difficult to ask Coach George to get better on us. It's just that the team sponsors don't care about this. They only know that the team's performance this year is good, and there is a great chance to get better results. This involves the issue of expectations. So in a way, the good performance of the team this year has become Coach George's weakness. At this time, Greet continued to provoke. Everyone has heard it. He admitted it himself, saying that our children are not good enough. This time, the emotions of the sponsors were provoked again. No matter how much Coach George explained, he did not mean it. But how could his mouth speak louder than a dozen mouths in the audience? In the end, Coach George could not say a word and could only stand on the stage helplessly. He looked like he was accepting the criticism of the audience. How can they do this? Outside the door, little George clenched his fists and expressed his dissatisfaction. It really can't go on like this, Mike said, pushing open the door of the conference room and walked in. Seeing a young and handsome student walk in, the sponsors were quiet for a while, and then they speculated about the identity of the person. I want to remind you that this year's Melford football team has achieved the best results ever. Mike glanced at the people below and continued, Coach George has contributed to the team's good results, so you have no reason to blame him now. On the contrary, if you want the team to achieve better results, you should continue to support Coach George's work. Hearing Mike's words, all the sponsors below fell silent. In fact, they were not so dissatisfied with Coach George. Everything was caused by greed. Seeing that the attitudes of the sponsors were changing, Greet quickly said, boy, don't think I don't know your relationship with the Cooper family. You are in the same group, so of course you will side with him. Greet explained Mike's identity to the sponsors. Then, he continued, moreover, if George hadn't asked you to be the quarterback in the last game, the team might not have lost. Your performance on the defensive end was simply a crime. So, both of you have to take a large part of the responsibility for the team's failure. Those who can sit here are at least football fans, and they obviously watched the last game. Although these people's football knowledge is not very professional, they can understand some basic tactical arrangements. At this moment, they finally connected Mike with the quarterback of the last game. Regarding the outrageous tactics of the quarterback not defending in the last game, some people began to express their opinions. Of course, these opinions are not good. Mike saw the reactions of the crowd, and he did not intend to indulge them. I believe that everyone who watched the last game knows what the team is like. Do you think that someone can do better than me in that situation? Who can't pass the buck? Moreover, Mike's performance in the last game is obvious to all. Anyone with a discerning eye can see that if his teammates were not weak, he would have gone further. Even if you have some strength, the non-defensive strategy you adopted in the last game is definitely the key to the team's loss. You are responsible for this. Greet still stubbornly said. He didn't forget the revenge of Mike beating his son into the hospital last time. Looking at the aggressive corner of the other party's mouth, Mike retorted, what responsibility do I need to take? In that situation, can someone else be the quarterback and lead the team to beat Austin? Can your son do it? Mike said that he was a non-stick pan. Since the other party was targeting him so much, Mike didn't mind pulling out the other party's son, Sam, and whipping his corpse. You are making specious arguments. Gret was furious. However, he had to admit that his son's football level was not as good as the other party. If Sam was allowed to take on the situation, the result would only be worse. However, Gret would not admit that he was wrong. He was still stubborn. If Sam is trained, he will definitely become a qualified quarterback. At least he will not let his teammates give up resistance on the defensive end. You also said that he was trained. In that situation, there was no time for him to train. You are making specious arguments, Mike said with a sarcastic look on his face. A correct version is found in the 16-9 book forum. Moreover, based on Mike's understanding of Sam, even if the other party is trained, it is difficult for him to become an excellent quarterback. It's not easy to be the brain of the team. Okay, Mike. Stop talking. Coach George pulled Mike and shook his head slightly. As the coach of the team, George didn't want to involve a certain player in the conflict, even if that person was Sam. Then, George no longer wanted to pay attention to the sponsors. So, he called Mike to leave the meeting room together. Coach George now wants to find the principal to see what his attitude is now. After all, the coach's salary is determined by the school, and there is no need to continue to argue with the sponsors. After the two people went out, they met up with George, and the three of them came to the door of the principal's office together. Don't go in. I want to talk to the principal alone, George said seriously. Without waiting for the two to answer, Coach George went into the principal's office alone. Coach George, you are here. Would you like a cup of coffee? Principal Tom saw George come in and asked with a smile. No need. George shook his head, stood across from the desk, and went straight to the point. I want to know how the school plans to arrange me next. Principal Tom looked at George across from him, was silent for a while, and then said, you also know the situation of the school. Sports funds have always been insufficient. This time, those sponsors donated a large sum of money to the school. This money is enough to update all the training equipment of the football team. With good equipment, the strength of the football team will also be improved next year. The lack of funds in public middle schools is indeed a big problem. As the principal, Tom has to selectively please a wave of sponsors when necessary for his own performance considerations. In the current situation of the football team, being able to attract sponsorship for the team will also be counted as the principal's performance. Listening to the principal's nagging, Coach George frowned. He interrupted the other party's speech and continued to ask, I just want to know, what is the school's arrangement for me? Considering the emotions of the sponsors, the school decided to let you serve as the assistant coach first. This time, Principal Tom finally answered the question directly. Chapter 103 Resignation. Assistant coach. George felt a little absurd. Then he calmed down and asked, what about the salary? George, who was middle-aged and had a family, had to bow to reality. If the salary offered by the school was appropriate, he would not mind being an assistant coach for the team. The school has clear regulations on the salary of employees. But don't worry, I will try my best to help you keep the salary of $500 per week. Principal Tom continued, and this time we have to demote you. You only need to be Wayne's assistant for a while, and when the storm is over, the school will consider promoting you to the position of head coach again. 500? And I have to be Wayne's assistant? George's expression changed again and again. In the past, when the team had no results, George's weekly salary was 500 million yuan. Then when the team's performance improved, his weekly salary had risen to 700 million yuan. Now, the team has achieved the best results in history, but I didn't expect the salary to drop back. Moreover, another point that George found difficult to accept was that he had to be Wayne's assistant. You know, Wayne was George's assistant before, and his teaching level was really not good. Now, George was asked to work under his former subordinate, which made him feel embarrassed. Seeing that George's face was getting worse and worse, Principal Tom said, George, the school will remember your efforts this time, and this situation will not last long. I also hope you can understand the difficulties of the school. George could no longer listen to the principal's big talk. He was silent for a long time, and finally seemed to have made some kind of decision. After taking off the baseball cap with the Melford logo on his head, and putting it on the principal's desk, George said, from today on, I'm no longer Melford's coach. You want to resign? Principal Tom looked surprised. Then, he quickly persuaded, George, don't be impulsive. We can discuss it. We can also talk about the salary. From the principal's reaction at this moment, it can be seen that he still recognized George's ability. No need, I have decided. George shook his head slightly and said in a calm tone. He no longer paid attention to the principal's retention and turned to leave the office. George, who walked out of the door, seemed to have put down a burden and exhaled heavily. How was the talk with the principal? Did you get a raise? Little George, who was waiting at the door, looked at his father's relaxed look and asked. No. George said, I have resigned. Our little George was surprised. How could this happen? Don't worry, I have my own plan. I'll tell you in the evening. George smiled and then said, now, you should go to training. It is now time for physical exercise in the school, and the football team should have started training. Oh, good. Little George walked towards the playground in a daze. After walking for a distance, he found that Mike did not catch up. Mike, aren't you going to training? You go first. I have something to do. Mike said. Okay, I will ask for leave for you. Little George muttered and left the corridor alone. He thought Mike had something to say to his father alone, and never thought that the other party wanted to quit the football team. Practice well in the future. You are a good candidate for playing football. George didn't know that Mike had the idea of quitting the team. He walked to his office and said, before I leave, I will mention it to Wayne. I will let you be the quarterback of the team next year. I have decided to quit the football team. Mike suddenly said, what? George stopped in surprise and persuaded him seriously. "You have such a good talent. Why don't you continue to play? Don't be affected by my resignation. I have my own considerations. In fact, I'm not very interested in football. Next, I will join the school's Olympiad team," Mike explained. George wanted to say that the other party was so talented in football that it would be a waste if he didn't play football. However, he soon realized that Mike's performance in cultural courses was not inferior to that of Sheldon. It seems that there is no problem in joining the Olympiad team. "Well, you decide for yourself." George, who figured out the key points, sighed. Then, he persuaded him again. "Mike, I still think that you should continue on the road of football. You have the potential to become a football star." However, Mike's expression was firm, and he obviously had his own ideas. So George didn't say anything more. Then, the two came to the sports office of the football team in silence. "George, you are here?" Coach Wayne, who was lying on a leather chair in the office, stood up quickly. The chair was originally prepared by the school for George. "It's okay, you sit down. The chair will be yours in the future," George said generously. No, Coach Wayne waved his hand awkwardly and said, "I'm sorry for what happened to you, but don't worry, you will still have the final say in the team in the future." Although Coach Wayne's teaching level is not good, he is very self-aware. A perfect version in 1619 book bar. "I have resigned. The team will be handed over to you in the future. I hope you can pay more attention to the team," George said with a heavy expression. After all, he has been the head coach of the Melford football team for so many years and has long had feelings for the team. "How could this happen?" Wayne said in surprise. "Did those sponsors make things difficult for you?" "I'll go and explain to them right now." Seeing Wayne's reaction, George smiled. Then, he said, "No need. Leaving the team is my own decision." "Are there other schools recruiting you?" Coach Wayne's mind turned quickly. Listening to the speculation of his former colleague, George smiled but said nothing. "Yes, your teaching level is good. It's not surprising that other schools are interested in you. It's just a pity that I can't cling to your thighs in the future," Coach Wayne half joked. "Okay, don't think too much," George also said in a joking tone. "Wait for me to pack my things, and this office will belong to you in the future." Alas. Coach Wayne sat back in his chair, and seeing George packing up his personal belongings, he sighed heavily. Wayne was still a little sad about the departure of his colleague. "Coach Wayne, I apply to quit the team." Mike took this opportunity to express his request. "What?" Coach Wayne was surprised again and almost jumped up from his chair. "Don't be impulsive, Mike. If George leaves, you don't have to go with him. The team will still need you in the future. It has nothing to do with George. I will join the school's mathematical Olympiad team next," Mike explained. Mathematical Olympiad? Coach Wayne also knew about Mike's good grades. He didn't know how to ask Mike to stay because he used the mathematical Olympiad as an excuse to quit the team. 10 minutes later, Coach Wayne lay weakly in his chair and watched the two generals of the team leave. Chapter 104 Opportunity. Mike sent George to the entrance of the teaching building, and the two were about to part. Next, Mike planned to report to the mathematical Olympiad team. "Hey, isn't this Coach George? Where are you going to pack up?" At this time, Greed just came to the entrance of the teaching building with his son. At this time, he had a familiar smile on his face, and it was completely impossible to tell that he had been embarrassed by George before. "Don't pretend. I have resigned from the team. Are you satisfied now?" George frowned and stared at Greed, not giving him a chance to get close to him. "Don't say that. Your leaving the team has nothing to do with me. It's all because of your lack of level." Greed put away the fake smile on his face, and his tone became gloating. "Whatever you say." George, who had already decided to leave, didn't argue with the other party. He took another look at the Melford campus and turned to walk out. "Coach, I'm sorry. I didn't know my dad would be like this." Sam, who followed behind his father, took 2 steps forward, as if he wanted to take his father to apologize to George. Sam also knew about what his father had done. His bad character had changed, and he vaguely realized that his father's behavior was wrong. "Don't apologize, Sam." This is an adult matter, and it has nothing to do with you. George looked at his players and his expression eased a little. Then he encouraged, "You are also talented in football. If you decide to go this way, remember to train well in the future." Strictly speaking, Sam's football talent is not the best, but it is better than many people. If he trains his skills as a running back or defensive end, even if he can't become a professional player in the future, he will have no problem playing in a local league. "I will, coach." Sam nodded seriously. After the training of this summer league, he can be regarded as a prodigal son who has returned, and thus felt the charm of football. "Okay, Sam. He is no longer your coach. Now, we should go meet the new head coach and prepare for you to be a quarterback next year." While Gretel called his son, he also glanced at George and Mike with pride. He donated money to the school football team this year, mixed into the sponsor team, and deliberately targeted George. The ultimate goal of this series of preparations is to make his son the main force of the team, quarterback. After all, in the eyes of outsiders who don't know much about football, the quarterback on the football field is the most prominent. Seeing Sam being pulled away by his father, George wanted to say something. But in the end, he realized that he was no longer the head coach of the team, so he should leave the problem to Coach Wayne to solve. In fact, with Sam's personality and ability limit, he is not suitable for the position of quarterback at all. If he insists on developing in this direction, he will not only drag down the team, but also waste his talents as a running back and defensive end. Shaking his head to get rid of the distracting thoughts in his mind, George said goodbye to Mike again, and left the school. George drove home alone, and saw his wife in the living room. Mary's work in the church is actually pretty good, except that the salary is not high. Mary only needs to work full day when believers go to worship on weekends. When there is nothing to do in the church, she only needs to work half a day at most. "George, why are you back? Doesn't the team need to train?" Mary, who was knitting woolen gloves on the sofa, asked. The summer in Texas is about to end, and Mary is preparing to knit some gloves and scarves for her family. "I was just about to tell you that I have quit my job on the team." George put down the sundries in his hands and went to the refrigerator to get himself a bottle of cold beer. Normally, George is not allowed to drink beer due to physical reasons. However, Mary can no longer care about these things. She dropped the knitting needles in her hands and asked in surprise, "Why? The team's performance is so good this year. Isn't the school preparing to give you a salary increase? And if you don't have this job, how will the family expenses be in the future?" The Cooper family's financial situation has just shown signs of improvement. Now George has suddenly lost his job, which is tantamount to a major blow to the family. With Mary's meager salary at the church, it is not enough to support the living expenses of the 3 children and the family. The issue of money is very realistic and important for a large family of 5. "Don't get excited, I haven't finished yet." George took a sip of beer and said calmly, "Actually, other schools are trying to recruit me. They offer very high salaries." Hearing her husband's words, Mary seemed to change her face and smiled. "Which school? Austin or Houston?" Mary could only think of the strong teams in Texas that could offer high salaries. No, none of them." George shook his head. After his wife guessed several schools in Texas in a row, he smiled and took out a letter. It's Oklahoma University. During this period, not only Mike received many invitation letters from schools, George was also noticed by other universities because he led the team to get good results. And the precious letter in George's hand was also the basis for his courage to resign. But after seeing the letter in her husband's hand, Mary's smile froze for a moment. She asked, "Is it a school in Oklahoma?" "Yes, Oklahoma High School is the best high school in Oklahoma, and their school football team is very strong." George did not notice the change in his wife's expression and was still looking forward happily. "The school board over there has promised me a high salary, and this is not the most important thing. You know, a good team is more likely to get good results. I may be able to get an invitation from a university with my good performance in Oklahoma High School." George usually looks indifferent, but if he really encounters an opportunity, he will not let it go. Because of the competition system, high school football leagues do not charge tickets, but college football leagues can sell tickets. In other words, if George can return to the position of college coach, his salary can at least double. With money, the quality of life of his family will naturally improve. Being able to realize self-worth and take care of his family is exactly George's ultimate goal. Wait a minute, George, I'm willing to support your work. But if our family goes to Oklahoma, what will happen to Mom? Compared to her husband's excitement, Mary's face has lost its smile. If the family really goes to Oklahoma, Mary will not only lose her church job, but also have to adapt to the local interpersonal relationships again, which will be very difficult and troublesome for a housewife. Mary can't accept such a change. It doesn't matter. Oklahoma is not far from Texas. We can come back to see Connie often. George said optimistically. Oklahoma and Texas are adjacent to each other, and the distance is not too far. If you drive, you can go one way in a day. Okay, George. Your new job is related to the whole family. I think you should ask the children's opinions again. Mary said with a twinkle in her eyes. Of course, the children's opinions are important. But I will convince them. George said confidently. Until now, he has not noticed that his wife's face is not right. Chapter 105 Mathematical Olympiad Team. On the other side, Mike followed his memory and came to the classroom where the school's mathematical Olympiad team was studying. Look who's here. Our big star Mike Kevin, the captain of the mathematical Olympiad team, who was looking around in the classroom, saw the person coming at the door of the classroom at a glance. Then, he stood up and expressed his welcome to Mike in an exaggerated and funny tone. Sit down, Kevin. It's still time to do the questions. Teacher Sharon, the counselor on the podium, frowned and stopped the jumpy captain of the mathematical Olympiad team. But I finished it. The lively Kevin defended himself. Then, he received a frosty look from Teacher Sharon. Okay, I know. I will keep quiet. Kevin immediately sat down and made a zipper-like motion on his mouth. Teacher Sharon, who had a conservative personality, also noticed Mike's arrival. She pulled out an unnatural smile to make herself look more friendly. Then, she said, "Come in, Mike. Find a place to do this set of papers first." Okay. Mike took the papers and looked into the classroom. There were only 4 students in the classroom. Apart from Kevin, who was eccentric, and Katie, who was beautifully dressed, the remaining 2 students wore thick glasses and looked like nerds. At this moment, the eyes of the 4 people were all on Mike. The 2 Olympiad team members wearing glasses were full of surprise. After all, Mike was in the limelight of the football team, and the 2 players wearing glasses never thought that he would join the Olympiad team. Here, Mike. Katie took the opportunity to greet Mike. After Mike sat down next to her, the girl also gave him a pen. Okay, do the questions carefully. You still have half an hour. After seeing Mike sitting down, Teacher Sharon on the podium reminded the other students who were watching. Mike also looked at the girl at the next table and looked at the test paper in his hand carefully. Chickens and rabbits in the same cage, solving spatial geometry. There were only 10 questions on the single-sided test paper, and the difficulty level was not high in Mike's opinion. On the podium, Teacher Sharon, who was watching Mike write quickly, nodded slightly. Half an hour passed quickly, and several team members, led by Kevin, handed in their test papers neatly. When receiving Mike's test paper, Teacher Sharon said, "You came late. I will give you another half an hour to answer the questions." "No, I finished it," Mike said. "Okay." Teacher Sharon glanced at Mike's test paper and had an idea in mind. Then, she picked up a book of Olympiad questions on the table and reminded him, "Your progress is much slower than other students. Take this book back and have a look. If you don't understand something, come and ask me." Okay. Mike took the question book and returned to his seat. While Teacher Sharon was marking the papers, Mike saw that all the other Olympiad team members took out their study materials and began to study seriously. Even Kevin, who had a lively personality, seemed to be studying very hard at this time. "Katie, is our daily task to study on our own?" Mike asked curiously. "Of course not. After Teacher Sharon finishes correcting the papers, she will explain to us a certain type of Olympiad questions." Katie explained. To put it bluntly, the daily task of the Olympiad team is to do an Olympiad paper. Then, after correcting the papers, Teacher Sharon will help everyone check for deficiencies and fill in the gaps. Another half an hour passed, and after correcting the papers, Teacher Karen said, everyone has made progress in this paper, and Kevin and Mike got full marks. Especially Mike, he deserves praise. Hearing that Mike got full marks in his first Olympiad test, the Olympiad team members were a little surprised at first, and then gave sparse applause. This also indicates that several old members of the Olympiad team have recognized Mike's ability. Mike, you are really amazing. Katie smiled and gave a thumbs up. Then, it was time for Teacher Karen to explain the wrong question collection to everyone. The whole afternoon was also spent doing questions and correcting mistakes. Okay, today's class is over. I hope that students who have made mistakes will review the knowledge points carefully after going down. After explaining the last wrong question, Teacher Sharon announced the end of get out of class. Then, the teacher left the classroom first. Mike, I still don't understand some questions. Can you explain them to me? Katie handed over her wrong question book and took the opportunity to ask. Well, okay. I'll go back and study it, and I'll explain the steps of the questions to you tomorrow. Mike took the wrong question book and answered. With Mike's IQ, the current Olympiad questions are not difficult for him. Looking at Mike's straightforward actions, Katie hesitated to speak. In fact, the girl's real purpose was to spend more time alone with Mike. But before the girl could muster up the courage, she invited Mike again. Captain Kevin came over. Mike, I know you are a genius like me. Kevin said with a smile. How about singing later? Although Kevin is the captain of the Olympiad team, the hip hop style clothes he wears make him look not like a nerd, but like a person who knows how to play. No, I'm going to go home in a while. Mike refused. That's a pity. Kevin looked regretful. If you come with us, we will definitely be able to date many beautiful girls. A correct version in 1619 book bar. After getting rid of the enthusiastic Kevin, Mike came to the school gate and met George. You quit the football team? George's first sentence when they met, he got straight to the point. Well, I joined the school's mathematical Olympiad team now. Mike said. What Olympiad math? You are so talented in football, why don't you continue to play? George said anxiously. This afternoon, after learning from Coach Wayne that Mike had quit the team, George was shocked. Moreover, two familiar people left the team in a row, which made George very uncomfortable. No reason, I just want to quit. Mike gave a panacea answer. You. George didn't know what to say to Mike. Then, he asked, does George know about this? Yes. Then how did he react? Similar to your reaction. No, I still think you should continue to play. The team can't do without you. Little George struggled for a while, and finally decided to persuade Mike with his family during dinner time. As soon as George got home, he was pulled aside by Mary. Little George, do you know that your father is going to teach at Oklahoma High School? Mary asked seriously. Is Oklahoma High School the school with a strong football team? If George teaches there, can I also play there? Little George asked with surprise. Oklahoma High School is in another state. Are you willing to leave here? Mary continued to ask with a gloomy face. Of course, it's Oklahoma High School. Little George's tone was full of yearning. Now he has begun to imagine himself joining a strong team, easily getting good grades, and being sought after. Here are your friends and people you are familiar with. Are you really willing to leave here and live in a strange place? Mary guided him with a strong purpose. Well, this is indeed a problem. Little George hesitated. Seeing her eldest son's attitude change, Mary's face relaxed a little. She urged, think about it carefully. We will discuss this issue again during dinner. Chapter 106 Choice. At the dinner table, before the meal started, the three Cooper children kept looking at their father. It was obvious that Mary had talked to them about their father before. After the prayer before dinner, George knocked on the table to attract everyone's attention and said, I have an important announcement. I received an invitation from the Oklahoma University football team. They offered me a very high salary, and I will have good development opportunities there. George confidently talked about the benefits of teaching in Oklahoma, and then he looked at the three children and asked, are you willing to support Dad's work? The old Texans have a strong sense of family. At this moment, George really hopes to get the support and recognition of his family. However, the three children fell into silence at this time. Obviously, the result of Mary's previous conversation with them played a role. Finally, it was Sheldon Jr. who spoke first. "If you go to Oklahoma to teach, do we need to move?" "Of course." George smiled and comforted, "But don't worry, with the salary offered to me by Oklahoma colleges and universities, we will soon be able to own our own house again in the local area." However, Sheldon Jr. didn't listen to his father's comfort. His thinking was the same as his mother's, afraid that the familiar rhythm of life would be disrupted. What's more, in the past 6 months, Sheldon Jr. has made rare friends here. He knows his own personality very well, and knows that, after changing the environment, he may never meet people like Dan and Mike who are willing to make friends with him. So, Sheldon Jr. said seriously, "I don't want to leave here and live in a new place. It will be very troublesome." The answer of the youngest son made George's confident expression on his face freeze. Then, he heard his youngest daughter, Missy, say, "I don't want to leave the small town of Telford either." When saying this, Mrs. I secretly looked at the handsome Mike. Obviously, she didn't want to part with Mike. The two children were still young, and they couldn't understand the importance of George's new job to the family. "Little George, what do you think?" George turned his attention to his eldest son. Little George frowned and thought for a while. He vaguely understood that his choice might have a significant impact on the family. Looking at the hopeful eyes of his parents looking at him at the same time, little George hesitated for a long time, shook his head and said, "I don't know." After reserving his opinion, he lowered his head silently and stopped talking. Hearing the answers of the three children, Mary was a little happy. However, in order to make her husband completely give up the idea, she took the opportunity to say, "Mom, Mike, you also tell me your opinions." In Mary's opinion, Grandma Connie is old and should not want to be separated from her family, especially since she still likes her good grandson Sheldon so much. As for Mike, based on his relationship with little George, he should not want his family to leave. However, the fact surprised Mary. Grandma Connie took a sip of beer and said slowly, "This opportunity is rare for George. I think he should seize it. Of course, the final decision should be discussed by your family." Grandma Connie, who has rich life experience, can easily distinguish the good from the bad. But this is the Cooper family's family affair after all, and she should not interfere too deeply. This is probably the wisdom of life. "I also think this is a good opportunity for George." Mike immediately expressed his opinion and then said no more. In fact, if outsiders are too deeply involved in such a major issue involving other people's families, it is easy to end up in a thankless situation. Hearing Connie and Mike's speeches, Mary's expression froze. This was not the answer she wanted at all. But soon, she regained her natural look and said, "Except for George's abstention, the opinions are now 2-2. Looking at the tangled look on her husband's face, Mary wanted to say directly that she did not agree with the family moving to Oklahoma. Just to take care of her husband's emotions, she tactfully continued, "How about this, George? You go to Oklahoma to teach, and I stay here to take care of the children, so that neither side will be delayed." This compromise seems to be taking care of George, but in fact it forces him to make a choice between family and work. It must be said that Mary's approach is very smart. The result is just as she thought. George, who attaches more importance to family, looked back and forth at the three children several times and made concessions. "Forget it. The job at Oklahoma University is not that good. I can find another job. It's no big deal." George gave up this time, which may be the best opportunity in his life, and chose to give the children a complete family. "That's great." Mary was a little moved to hear her husband's words. Then she stood up and gave him a hug. The three children also showed happy expressions when they heard that their father chose to stay. This matter also seemed to have a happy ending. However, as an outsider, Mike saw George's lonely expression under his reluctant expression. Check out the correct version on the 16:9 book forum. Grandma Connie also frowned and looked at her daughter. Then, she suggested, "Since George is unemployed now, why don't you let him take care of my and Mike's meals in the future? Of course, we will pay him 800 yuan for meals every month until he finds a job." It can be imagined that George has been a football coach for half his life, and he has no other skills except football. It is very difficult for him to find a suitable job again. Grandma Connie also wants to use the excuse of meal expenses to temporarily relieve the financial pressure of the Cooper family. This, George, who has not yet figured it out, is about to refuse. In his opinion, Grandma Connie and Mike are both his own people, and 800 yuan a month for living expenses is too much. You know, Mary's weekly salary for her job in the church is only 200 yuan, which is only 800 yuan a month, if converted into months. However, Mary, who thinks more long term, sees Grandma Connie's intention. After glaring at her husband, she agreed on his behalf. Of course, no problem. If you want to eat special barbecue in the future, you can ask George to make it for you. In fact, George only had a secret roast beef. Usually, Mary could take care of Mike and his meals. After finalizing the agreement to eat together, the atmosphere at the table became lively. At this time, George also remembered that Mike had quit the football team. I also have something to discuss with everyone. George imitated his father's previous behavior and said, "What do you think about Mike's withdrawal from the team? It's good. It's a waste for Mike to play football with this face." Grandma Connie smiled and joked. Yeah, Missy nodded in agreement. Football is a barbaric sport. Little Sheldon also expressed his opinion. George had known Mike's decision for a long time and didn't say much at this time. So far, George's idea of getting Mike back to the football team has been unsuccessful. Chapter 107 Threat from the Little Girl. Next, the topic at the dinner table soon came to Mike's participation in the school's mathematical Olympiad team. In response to everyone's curiosity, Mike briefly told them about the situation of the mathematical Olympiad team today. After dinner, Sheldon called Mike alone. "Mike, can you lend me that mathematical Olympiad exercise book?" Sheldon's focus is always so surprising. But it is understandable that, since he lost to Mike in the math test last time, Sheldon has been looking for an opportunity to compete with him again. And this time, the mathematical Olympiad exercise book is a good opportunity to prove himself. If Sheldon can learn the knowledge in the mathematical Olympiad exercise book before Mike, he can prove that he is no worse than the other party. Okay, but you need to wait 2 days. Mike didn't understand Sheldon's train of thought this time and casually said, "I can only lend it to you after I finish the exercises above." This was not the answer Sheldon wanted at all. After rolling his eyes a few times, he said, "How about this? You lend me the exercise book during the cultural class in the morning. I will return it to you when you go to the mathematical Olympiad team in the afternoon. It just so happens that we can compete to see who can learn the knowledge above first. Is that so?" Mike now saw Sheldon's intention. The other party obviously had not given up the idea of competing with him. However, thinking that Sheldon had mastered all the knowledge of the 11th grade, it would not be a big deal to learn a little more mathematical Olympiad knowledge. So Mike agreed. "Okay, I will give you the exercise book tomorrow morning." In a blink of an eye, a week passed, and both Mike and Sheldon had thoroughly understood the knowledge points in the mathematical Olympiad exercise book. After many mutual verifications, the two barely tied, and neither of them could stump the other in the mathematical Olympiad knowledge points. It has to be said that little Sheldon is really talented in learning. Mike can keep up with his progress because he has teacher Sharon behind him. At dinner time that day, George, who has not found a suitable job yet, prepared a meal of his own secret roast beef for everyone. After dinner, as soon as little Sheldon left, Mary called all the remaining people mysteriously and asked solemnly, "Have you found that Shelly is a little strange recently? He has always been like that." "Weird," little George said indifferently. Mary glared at her eldest son, told him to shut up, and then talked about her discovery. It turned out that this morning, when Mary sent little Sheldon out, she found a layer of foam board hidden in his clothes. So Mary guessed that someone in the school was bullying her youngest son. It's a bit strange. Mike recalled the strange walking posture of little Sheldon today and nodded. I knew it. Seeing that Mike agreed with her opinion, Mary skipped her eldest son and asked directly, "Mike, have you ever thought about who would bully Shelly in school?" Mike thought about it and shook his head. In school, Sheldon used to be protected by George and his son, so no one would bully him. Now, she and George are watching over him, so no one would provoke him. Mary continued to think for a while. Suddenly, her eyes lit up and she said, "If it's not in school, then it must be on the way to school." Yes, George used to pick up Sheldon when he went to school. Now George is busy looking for a job and can't take care of it. Or, I'll keep an eye on Sheldon on the way to school. When George heard that his brother was bullied, he immediately proposed a solution. Although he usually looks like he doesn't get along with Sheldon, he actually cares about his brother very much. This is not a long-term solution. We need to solve the problem fundamentally, and we need to find the person who bullied Sheldon, Mary said firmly. Whenever she encounters something about Sheldon, she will pay special attention to it. On the contrary, George on the side showed a lack of interest. His focus now is all on finding a new job, and he thinks it is normal for children to encounter some problems in life. This is also a process that every boy must go through as he grows up. How do we find out who bullied Sheldon? Little George asked reliably. It's up to you and Mike. Mary organized her words and expressed her thoughts. She wanted to let little George and Mike follow little Sheldon silently from tomorrow to find out who bullied little Sheldon on the road. Hearing Mary's proposal, little George and Mike both said no problem. The next day, not long after leaving the house, little George hid behind a small tree and said excitedly, "Sure enough, there is a problem 10 meters in front of little George and Mike." Little Sheldon was wrapped tightly, walking while looking around, looking very cautious. Little Sheldon's performance made it hard for people not to associate him with trouble. I said, "Do you really need to? This small tree can't stop you." Mike looked at little George's appearance as he entered the role, and he was powerless to complain. To be honest, now little George is hiding behind the tree and sneaking around, looking more like a bad guy than a detective. "Hey, I'm used to it." Little George smiled awkwardly and walked out from behind the tree. In fact, Mike and little George didn't need to do much, just follow little Sheldon from a distance. The more normal they behave, the better. Something's going on. Little George, who was silently observing little Sheldon, took only a few steps and seemed to have discovered important information. After a scream, he hid behind a tree again. A perfect version in 1619 book bar. Mike looked around and saw that little Sheldon in front of him was also looking for a small tree to hide in panic, as if he had encountered a natural enemy. Seeing the brothers' identical actions, Mike slapped his head helplessly. The trees on the roadside are only the size of a bowl at most, and there is no way to hide a person. The brothers' actions are tantamount to covering their ears and stealing the bell. "Here it comes." Little George followed his brother's line of sight and said excitedly, "It's Herschel." Sure enough, when little Sheldon hid, Herschel from the neighbor's house walked out of the door. The Herschel family is the neighbor of the Cooper family. As the male owner, Herschel is very similar to George in age and size. But compared to George's slightly fat body, Herschel looks more robust. It shouldn't be him. Mike looked at Herschel and shook his head. "Why?" asked George. "Look at Sheldon," Mike prompted. When Herschel appeared, Sheldon was still looking out, and there was no fear on his face. Judging from Sheldon's reaction, the person who bullied him must not be Herschel. "That's Billy. I know this little guy likes to bully Sheldon," George said again. Behind Herschel, a chubby 9-year-old boy walked out. Although Billy, the neighbor's child, would send some home-raised eggs to the Cooper family from time to time, he also had a history of teasing little Sheldon. This made George think more. "It's not him either." Mike shook his head. The reason for his judgment was the same as before. Who would it be? George, who made 2 wrong judgments, was a little discouraged. At this moment, little Sheldon, who was hiding behind a tree in front, seemed to be frightened and ran out from behind the tree screaming, and then ran away clumsily. Mike and George hurriedly looked at the road and saw the 6-year-old girl Barbie from the neighbor's house, smiling after the prank was successful. "It's Barbie." After Herschel drove and sent his child away, George came out from behind the tree with an unbelievable look on his face. Chapter 108, The War Between Neighbors. Time came to the evening again, when the family knew that the ultimate culprit who bullied little Sheldon was a little girl who was only 6 years old. Everyone showed a strange expression of disbelief. Grandma Connie held back her laughter and asked, "Little Pancake, are they right? You were bullied by a little girl?" Little Sheldon's embarrassment was exposed, and he did not deny it, but explained seriously, she is not an ordinary little girl, but a little devil. Hearing her good grandson admit it, the smile in Grandma Connie's eyes became more obvious. She continued to ask curiously, how did the 6-year-old little devil bully our little pancake? She tortured me mentally, little Sheldon said, and it seemed that terrible memory sounded again, and a look of fear appeared on his face unconsciously. It turns out that little Sheldon is very emotionally sensitive. When someone shows obvious evil intentions towards him, he will panic. Even if the other party is just a cute 6-year-old girl. And hearing the answer of her good grandson, this time Grandma Connie finally couldn't help laughing out loud. Grandma Connie had seen the little daughter of the Herschel family many times. She was a very cute little girl, half a head shorter than little Sheldon. Grandma Connie really couldn't imagine that her good grandson was bullied by a little girl younger than him. On the other side, little Sheldon looked at the smile on his grandmother's face and felt very aggrieved. Then he tucked his arms under his feet, turned around and ran to his room with big strides. Then, with a bang, he slammed the door shut. Okay, everyone, be serious. Mary took the lead in putting away the smile on her face and said seriously, since we have found the real culprit who bullied Shelley, we should solve the problem quickly. If you want to say that the person Mary is most nervous about in this family, it must be her little son. In addition, she just saw the aggrieved look on little Sheldon's face. Therefore, even if the one who bullied little Sheldon was a 6-year-old girl, Mary took it very seriously. George, why don't you go and talk to the Herschel family and ask them to take care of their little daughter? Mary assigned the problem to the head of the family. No, George, who was holding a bottle of beer, shook his head and said, this is just a joke between children. It's not serious enough. George, who was annoyed by the trouble, said that he couldn't afford to lose face. I don't think it's necessary either. Let George do it, said Grandma Connie on the side. Grandma Connie, who has rich life experience, knows that once an adult intervenes in the conflict between children, it is likely to quickly escalate a small matter. What should we do? We can't let Shirley go on like this. Mary muttered, and then turned her eyes to George and Mike, who were watching the show on the side. Now as a father, George should not do it, but George and Mike are still children, just right to negotiate with the Herschel family. George, Mike, why don't you go there? Mary suggested. No problem, leave it to us. George took on the task readily. As mentioned earlier, George actually cares about Sheldon, and it's rare for the family to use him. Therefore, George wanted to take this opportunity to make himself look more like a man in this family. Afterwards, George and Mike, who received the commission, came to the house of Herschel and knocked on the door. The distance between the house of Herschel and the house of Cooper was less than 100 meters. Compared with the independent small house of Cooper, the house of Herschel was bigger, and it also had an independent large yard next to it. The door opened, and a tall and strong figure came out. Oh, you are the children of Cooper. Herschel looked at the two people in front of him in surprise, and then asked, it's so late, what's the matter? At this time, Herschel was holding a bottle of beer in his hand, and his face with the short beard was still a little lazy. Obviously, he should have been enjoying his leisure time before. George, who had already organized his words, suddenly saw the tall figure of the other party and stuttered. We are here to remind you to tell your little daughter not to bully Sheldon again. Mike added. Yes, we are here for this matter. Little George saw the opportunity and quickly echoed. Herschel, who was now at the door, took a while to react before he understood what the two people in front of him were talking about. Then, he asked with a strange expression, Sheldon was bullied, and you said it was my little daughter who did it. Are you sure? We are sure, we all saw it before. Little George answered affirmatively. As a well-known local genius, Herschel was of course also familiar with little Sheldon, but he could never have imagined that his 6-year-old daughter could bully the other party. Okay. Although Herschel thought this was very funny, he still turned around and shouted to the house, Barbie, come out. What's the matter, Dad? With a sweet voice, Barbie's small figure came to the door. Barbie, tell Dad honestly, have you bullied Sheldon? Herschel asked softly. Read the correct version in 1619 book bar. No, Barbie raised her little face and answered. Her big eyes blinked. It was hard to doubt that she was lying. Sure enough, Herschel believed his little daughter, and he immediately said, "It's okay, Barbie. Go back and play." "Okay, Dad," Barbie replied sweetly again. Then, she looked back and forth between Mike and George with curiosity. Finally, the little girl took advantage of her father's inattention and made a big grimace to George, and then ran back to the house happily. "You all saw it." Barbie said he didn't bully Sheldon. After watching his daughter leave, Herschel turned around and said, "How is it possible? I saw it with my own eyes before." George retorted, "Okay, George, don't say it." Mike held the other party and shook his head slightly. Then, he turned to Herschel and said, "Excuse me." After saying goodbye to Herschel, on the way back, George became more and more depressed. Finally, he couldn't help but complain, "Mike, why did you stop me just now? We clearly saw with our own eyes that little girl bullying Sheldon. Moreover, she just made faces at me. I know all these things, but do you have any evidence?" Mike asked back. Mike had discovered before that Herschel was definitely a daughter slave. If the two of them didn't have solid evidence, he would definitely favor his daughter more. This kind of thing, if you think about it from another perspective, you can understand. And looking at Barbie's performance just now, although she is a little naughty, she is definitely still a cute little girl. According to this logic, Barbie's bullying of little Sheldon is more like a little girl looking for a playmate. Of course, these are Mike's personal understandings. Next, when he goes back, he will remind little Sheldon to try to make friends with Barbie. It is better to let the children solve such children's problems by themselves. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 109, The War Between Neighbors, continued. However, George didn't have the same good attitude as Mike. He wanted to show his ability in this matter, so he was still thinking of other ways. But until he returned to the doorstep, George couldn't think of a good way to help Sheldon solve the problem. He sighed heavily, stopped at the doorstep, looked at Mike hopefully, and asked, "Is there really no other way?" "Yes." Mike smiled and said in a joking tone, "The other party is just a 6-year-old girl. If you want her to stop bullying Sheldon, there is a way that is very simple and practical." "What is the way? Tell me quickly." George became interested. "Of course it's tit for tat." Mike smiled and continued, "You can find a time to threaten her alone. Tell her not to get close to Sheldon again. Wouldn't that solve the problem?" "That's a good idea." Little George agreed, and then added, "In order to successfully scare the other party, do you think I need to prepare something else?" Seeing that the other party really took his words seriously, Mike said speechlessly, "Are you sure you want to do this? The other party is a 6-year-old girl. When you are taken away, don't mention my name." "Hey, I'm kidding too." Little George shook his head and said, "How could I really bully a child? Facts have proved that, although little George has poor academic performance and doesn't like to be clean, he is definitely a good person." The two who resolved the misunderstanding chatted for a few more words at the door before entering the house. In the living room, the Cooper family was waiting for news here. Even little Sheldon walked out of the bedroom again at this moment. "How is it? What did the other party say?" Mary asked. Little George, who had not completed the task, shook his head and said nothing. On the other side, Mike recounted the situation just now and also expressed his own thoughts. "You did the right thing. Maybe Shelly can have another little playmate." Grandma Connie smiled and expressed her opinion. "No, I don't want to be friends with her." Little Sheldon's face was filled with fear again. Then, he grabbed Mike and said, "You have to help me." In little Sheldon's heart, Barbie has become his nightmare. It is too difficult for him to become friends with the other party. "How do you want me to help you?" Mike asked kindly. "How about you teach me to fight?" Little Sheldon thought about it for a while, and then said excitedly, "I've seen you play on the football field, and your opponents were knocked away by you." Little Sheldon is not a person who doesn't know how to adapt. If necessary, he doesn't mind using force. What's more, there is a very suitable candidate to be a force teacher in front of him. Are you sure you want to use violence against a little girl? Mike persuaded again. I think the probability of you defeating the other party is less than the probability of you becoming friends. No, probability can't solve my problem. I won't be friends with the devil. Little Sheldon confirmed his thoughts. Of course, Sheldon's reason did not convince Mike, but Mary was moved. Finally, with Mary's advice, Mike and Sheldon went to the yard. First, let's try the most direct collision. Mike taught Sheldon the opposite side the technique of collision. Speed, strength, angle, etc. At this time, Sheldon tied a layer of foam board on his body again and listened carefully. However, when he actually operated it, it was not the same. Looking at the fully armed Sheldon, who hit him with an awkward movement, and then bounced out, and fell to the ground, Mike covered his eyes helplessly. Okay, the power collision is not suitable for you. Mike changed his mind and said, next, I will teach you the skill-based hug and throw. Compared with violently knocking people down, hugging and throwing requires less strength, and is easier to master. Mike does not need to train Sheldon to be a wrestling master. As long as the other party can learn simple hug and throw techniques, it is enough to deal with a 6-year-old girl and protect himself. However, Sheldon's athletic talent once again surprised Mike. Looking at the little Sheldon who was holding his waist and hanging up, Mike reminded him, first, you need to touch the ground with both feet to exert your strength. Secondly, when you are not strong enough, you can stretch one foot behind the other person and trip him with clever strength. You are right, little Sheldon learned from experience and tried to use Professor Mike's method. However, when he stretched one leg behind Mike and exerted force, he lost his center of gravity and fell to the ground again. Puff Grandma Connie, who was watching the teaching, almost sprayed out the beer in her mouth when she saw the clumsy appearance of little Sheldon. Okay, you just started learning. This is normal. Mike pulled little Sheldon up and comforted him with words that he didn't believe himself. However, this time little Sheldon also realized that he had no talent in sports, and he didn't want to continue to embarrass himself here because of his arrogant personality. After declining Mike's teaching again, little Sheldon went back to his room alone. Read the correct version in the 16:9 book bar. The next day, in order to avoid Barbie's entanglement, Sheldon followed George and Mike on the way to and from school. However, his troubles did not end there. When Sheldon returned home and went out alone to get the mail at the door, he happened to meet Barbie, who was waiting there. Don't come over, Sheldon hid behind the mailbox and trembled. Then, he thought of the hint Mike gave him and said tentatively, Barbie, do you want to make friends with me? I can take you to see the trains I collected. Barbie on the opposite side obviously had planned it in advance. She didn't say a word, with a weird smile on her face, and walked forward step by step. This situation scared Sheldon so much that he was suppressed and retreated all the way. Finally, after hitting the wall, Sheldon posed in a strange posture and shouted, don't come over again. Be careful, I will knock you away. But for Sheldon's bluff, Barbie's mouth corners hooked a more frightening smile and still couldn't hold the pace of her feet. You asked for it. In a panic, Sheldon rushed towards the little girl opposite in a strange posture. However, perhaps because he was too nervous, or because he had not yet learned the skill of bumping into people, Sheldon tripped and fell to the ground after running 2 steps. When Barbie saw Sheldon fall, her expression changed, and she wanted to go forward to check the situation. But Sheldon, who had been frightened for a long time, stared and retreated while shouting help. Sheldon, what's wrong with you? Little George, who rushed out after hearing the sound, saw Sheldon lying on the ground and about to cry, and asked, Barbie, she's here again. Sheldon said in panic. Ah. Little George looked around and did not find the shadow of Barbie. You are injured. Little George retracted his gaze and pointed at Sheldon's knee and said, blood, I'm bleeding. Little Sheldon shouted again. It's just a little scratch. Little George checked the other party's injuries and then silently helped Sheldon back to the house. After the two left, a little head popped up from the lawn nearby. Chapter 110 Conflict escalates. When Mary returned home, she saw the gauze tied on Sheldon's knee. She asked in surprise and distress, what happened? It seems that he fell down by himself. I don't know the details. Little George realized that Mary was on the verge of exploding and hurried to explain. No, it was Barbie who did it. She is a little devil. Little Sheldon seemed to have found his backbone when he saw his mother coming back and insisted on his own opinion. At this time, Grandma Connie and Mike also came to Cooper's house. Seeing the injury on Sheldon's knee, they were also surprised. Then, Grandma Connie asked curiously, "Little Biscuit, did Barbie attack you?" Although little Sheldon felt wronged, he still shook his head and said truthfully, "No, but her smile is very scary." Smile? How scary can the smile of a cute little girl be? Grandma Connie said she couldn't understand. On the other hand, Mary didn't care so much. She heard that Barbie bullied her little son again. She said excitedly, "No, I'm going to go find the Herschels to have a discussion." Mary rolled up her sleeves and was about to go out. Wait. Mary George ran out of the kitchen, grabbed his wife, and said, "I've learned about the situation at that time. Sherry took the initiative to attack others and fell down. It has nothing to do with Barbie. It was also a coincidence that George was drinking beer in the house when little Sheldon got into trouble. Then, he immediately asked his two sons about the situation at that time. By the way, he also treated the scratch on little Sheldon's knee. Knowing that his youngest son only had a minor skin injury, George still regarded it as a child's play. After all, George had seen too many injured people on the football field. If the scratch like little Sheldon was not treated quickly, it might heal by itself. Therefore, George, who didn't want to make a big deal, continued to persuade, "Mary, you are too emotional now. Going to the Herschels in your situation will only make things worse." "Then what do you say?" Mary looked at her husband with a hint of dissatisfaction. In her heart, as the father of little Sheldon, George should firmly help him when his son is bullied. "Let's do this. When I have time, I will go and talk to Herschel." George eased the atmosphere and then said with a smile, "I have prepared dinner. Don't let this kind of thing affect everyone's mood for dinner." Because George has not found a job yet, he has recently taken the initiative to undertake some housework. Mary, watching her husband go to the kitchen, shook her head slightly, her face full of disappointment. In the subsequent dinner time, the family also made the dining atmosphere very heavy because of Mary's ugly face. However, Mary's bad mood did not end there. At noon the next day, when Mary returned home, after finishing her work at the church, she was still worried about the safety of her little son. Because she was too worried, she kept flashing through her mind the scene of little Sheldon being bullied by Barbie. Finally, under this mental pressure, Mary couldn't wait for her husband to deal with this matter. She took out a bottle of tomato juice from the cupboard and left the house in a hurry. After searching for a while, Mary came to the bowling alley with tomato juice. Herschel's wife Brenda worked in this bowling alley. "Mary, why are you here?" Grandma Connie, who was killing time in the bowling alley, saw Mary. "Nothing." Mary hid the tomato juice in her sleeve and then asked, "Where is Brenda?" "Just in front, the first counter along the road." Grandma Connie pointed down the road and asked uncertainly, "What do you want to see Brenda for? Do you want to apply for a bowling card?" Mary shrugged in an ambiguous way and then walked towards the counter. "She doesn't look like she wants to play bowling." Grandma Connie was surprised for a moment and then quietly followed her daughter. Because they often spend time here, Grandma Connie actually has a good relationship with Brenda, who works in the bowling alley. She doesn't want to see her daughter and Brenda conflict here. Mary, who came to the service counter along the road, saw Brenda working at a glance. When enemies meet, their eyes turn red. Mary pushed through the crowd and came to the first counter. "What's the matter, Mary?" Brenda asked with a professional smile. "Stop pretending." Mary stared at her fiercely and said, "Your little daughter Barbie beat up our Sheldon. You must give an explanation." "What? Barbie beat up Sheldon? Where?" Brenda, who didn't know what happened, showed a look of surprise on her face. "Oh, you're still pretending," Mary sneered, and was about to continue to argue with the other party. Seeing that the conflict was about to escalate, Grandma Connie quickly squeezed through the crowd and came to the counter. "Calm down, Mary, this is where Brenda works." Grandma Connie comforted her daughter first. A perfect version in a book bar. Because of Mary's noise, all the customers at the first counter hid aside. Instead, not far away, there was a large circle of people watching the excitement. If this situation continues, it will definitely affect Brenda's work, and she may even be fired. After holding her daughter, Grandma Connie smiled at Brenda apologetically and then explained the cause and process of the incident. Later, Grandma Connie also said that little Sheldon's injury was not serious. After hearing the whole story, Brenda's face relaxed. Then, she looked at the guests around her who were disturbed by Mary and asked, "Are you going to come and make trouble with me, just for such a small matter?" In the small town of Telford, where jobs are tight, Mary disturbed her work because of the little things between children, which made Brenda feel that she was making a fuss. This is not a small matter, it is related to the safety of little Sheldon, which is not a small matter for Mary. Seeing that Brenda did not take the matter seriously, she shouted, "You must apologize and promise that Barbie will not get close to Shelly in the future." In Mary's view, this request is not excessive. "You came to my workplace to make a scene, and you asked me to apologize to you?" Brenda saw that more and more people were watching the excitement around her, and she said with some dissatisfaction, "What if I say no?" This time, Brenda's attitude really annoyed Mary. "Your family is really not good people, especially Barbie, who has been a bad kid since she was a kid." Mary was so angry that she started to throw a tantrum without caring about anything. Grandma Connie on the side couldn't stop her. "What? Barbie is a bad kid? I think your Sheldon is a weirdo." Brenda was instantly angered when she saw the other party talking about her lovely daughter's faults and began to criticize the other party's youngest son. The quarrel between the two mothers escalated instantly because it was related to their own children, and the scene became more and more chaotic. Mary, who was finally angry beyond her reason, took out the tomato juice hidden in her sleeve and madly poured it on the counter. Brenda, who was splashed with tomato juice, found a bottle of cream flowers for making desserts on the counter. So, the fight between the two mothers turned from quarreling to throwing seasonings at each other. After a fight, both of them became extremely embarrassed. Of course, the most unlucky one was Grandma Connie. She wanted to persuade them to stop fighting, but she was splashed with tomato juice and cream flowers by the two people who lost their reason. Chapter 111, Conflict Resolved. Because of the trouble in the bowling alley, Connie and her grandmother were taken away by law enforcement officers who rushed to the scene. After taking notes and mediating for an entire afternoon, the three were not released until the evening. George, who had just finished making dinner, saw his wife and Connie coming in a panic and asked in surprise, "What happened? Did you go to the Christmas war?" Although Mary and Connie had cleaned up the foreign objects on their faces and hair in the afternoon, the red and white seasonings stuck on their bodies were still very obvious. "What's going on? It's Brenda again." Like a shrew, Mary sat on the stool, as if she was very tired, and complained. Hearing her words, George didn't react much, but Connie, who went to the refrigerator to get a beer, turned around and looked at her daughter in surprise. In terms of the degree of shrew, Mary is no worse than Brenda. Connie's grandmother has a deep understanding of this. Next, the family sat at the dining table and listened to Mary's narration of what happened in the afternoon. Of course, when she was telling the story, Mary deliberately ignored the fact that she was the first to cause trouble. She emphasized that Brenda was rude and unreasonable. After hearing his wife's words, George thought of the scene of the battle between tomato juice and cream flowers, and he just felt a little funny. However, seeing the indignant look on his wife's face, George still frowned and pretended to be angry and said, "Brenda is really too much this time. How could she splash you with cream flowers?" After getting her husband's support, Mary also instigated, "George, you should go to the Herschel family this time. Let them know that the Cooper family is not easy to mess with." Looking at his wife's expectant eyes, George, as the head of the family, was a little embarrassed. However, in the end, he agreed. "Okay, I'll go to the Herschel family and judge with them." As he said that, George puffed up his chest and made a fierce look and walked towards the door. But before he could open the door, there was a knock on the door. When he opened the door, it was Herschel standing outside the house, and at this moment he also had a bluffing and fierce expression on his face. Obviously, he was also instigated by his wife. The two men in the same situation looked at each other and understood each other's situation. "You wait at home. I'll go talk to Herschel alone." George gave his wife a reassuring look and walked out of the room. The two men outside the house tacitly did not mention what happened this afternoon. Then, at Herschel's suggestion, the two went to his independent large yard. In the yard, Herschel built a chicken coop by himself. In addition to raising chickens and getting eggs, there are many good things hidden in the weeds. After Herschel took out a few bottles of beer from the secret warehouse, he turned on the old tape recorder next to it and played old songs. The two middle-aged men relaxed and lay on the haystack, drinking beer and listening to songs, and the atmosphere instantly became gentle. Mary, who stayed at home, began to worry about her husband. In her opinion, if the two men really started fighting, her husband might not be Herschel's opponent. In fact, after the big fight this afternoon, Mary's anger had been vented almost. Little George, Mike, go out and see what's going on. Don't let George really get into a conflict with the other party. He has a bad heart. Mary said anxiously. Okay, little George was also worried about his father. After answering, he called Mike and went out. After patrolling outside the house, he didn't see his father. Little George said anxiously, what should I do? Little George knew his father's situation very well. The other party looked very strong, but in fact he was very weak and had a bad heart. If they really had to fight, little George was afraid that his father would suffer. Don't worry, let's go over there and see. Mike pointed to the big yard of the Herschel family and said in the direction where the music came from. Little George, who had no opinion, followed Mike to the chicken coop of the Herschel family. He listened for a while with his ears close to his chest and said, the music is so loud that I can't hear what's going on inside. Maybe the music is to cover up the sound of fighting. What's there to guess? Just go in and see, Mike said, and pushed open the small wooden door in front of him. Two middle-aged men were lying on their backs in the chicken coop, each holding a bottle of beer. They looked relaxed and comfortable. Looking at the harmonious atmosphere, it didn't look like there had been any conflict. Dad, little George called out uncertainly. George sat up from the haystack, and when he saw that it was his son, he smiled and said, little George, why are you here? How is your family? Mom is worried about you. Little George looked at his father's comfortable look and didn't know what expression to put on. You know, until he came in just now, little George was still worried about his father, whether there would be any problems. Now he doesn't have to worry about the other party, but little George is still a little angry. Oh, go back and tell Mary and the others that I'm fine. George lay down comfortably again and continued, I'll go home in a while. A correct version in the 16:9 book forum. Obviously, the comfortable environment here makes George not want to leave. After putting aside his worries, George saw several bottles of beer placed next to the haystack. He asked tentatively, can I stay here for a while? Herschel saw what George was thinking and smiled and welcomed him. Sure, you two come and sit here. He opened a bottle of beer for George and Mike. George on the side glared at his son who was laughing foolishly but didn't say much. Then, in the sound of music, Herschel continued, where were we just talking about? By the way, it was about building a breeding base. Herschel continued to talk about his own concerns with George. It turned out that Herschel wanted to quit his job at the repair shop and build a chicken farm by himself, but his wife disagreed. He envied George very much, who was now jobless. George, on the other hand, did not avoid his son and talked about his own difficulties. It turned out that he had been anxious to find a job these days, but he was also worried because he didn't know anything except football. He was a little envious of Herschel's stable job. How about this? You come to work in my repair shop, Herschel suggested. Thank you for your kindness, but no thanks. George shook his head and refused. Mike, who was standing by, heard George's distress and said, George, I have some savings here. How about I use it to start a small business for you? The money Mike got from Jack for buying photos, plus the remaining living expenses, totaled more than 20,000 yuan. Although this money was not enough to buy a storefront, it was definitely enough to set up a barbecue stall in the commercial street. It just so happened that George's secret roast beef was good enough to set up a stall. Thank you for your kindness, but I have decided to apply for a job at the sports equipment store in town. George explained his plan. At this point, Mike could see that George was not unable to find a job, but wanted to find a job related to football. Obviously, the other party still did not give up football. Chapter 112 Agreement. On the other side, Missy, who was staying in the house, looked at the anxious look of little Sheldon and remembered Mike's previous instructions. Mike had suggested that Missy contact Barbie. After all, the two little girls could easily become friends. And when Barbie and Missy become good friends, the little girl will naturally stop harassing little Sheldon. In Mike's opinion, this is the most gentle and appropriate way to solve little Sheldon's troubles. "Sheldon, do you want to get rid of your current predicament?" Missy asked. "Do you have a way?" Little Sheldon looked at his sister, who was only a few minutes older than him, with suspicion. In his opinion, with his smart brain, he couldn't think of a solution to the problem, and Missy was even less likely to have a good suggestion. Of course, Missy smiled confidently and then stretched out her little arm and gestured a strong posture. "I can help you. Just go and get rid of Barbie." This time, little Sheldon seemed to understand that Missy didn't think of a good way, but wanted to use force to solve the trouble. In the heart of little Sheldon, Missy, who often teased him, was definitely a big devil. Now, using the big devil to deal with the little devil, there is nothing quicker than this. Then little Sheldon rationally analyzed that 9-year-old Missy could definitely beat 6-year-old Barbie. His troubles could finally be solved. "That's great. Barbie is left to you." Little Sheldon's eyes lit up, and he had never felt that Missy was so useful. Missy agreed readily. However, she did not leave after taking the task, but looked at little Sheldon with a smile on her face. "Is there anything else?" Little Sheldon was a little timid when he was looked at by the other party, and then asked carefully. Missy did not speak this time. While keeping her smile, she stretched out her little hand and rubbed her fingers. "Do you want a reward?" The clever little Sheldon understood instantly. Seeing that the other party understood what she meant, Missy nodded, and her smile became even brighter. Although it was Mike's request to make friends with Barbie, Missy didn't mind getting some benefits for herself in it. "Okay, wait a minute, I'll go get my pocket money," little Sheldon said, and ran to the room. If money could solve Barbie's problem, Sheldon, who was eager to get rid of the torture, would be very happy. After a while, he came back with a handful of small bills. Missy took the bills and looked at the reward of less than 5 million yuan in her hand. She shook her head unsatisfied, indicating that it was not enough. "This is all my pocket money." Little Sheldon frowned, and then he said with a distressed look, "Or, I will give you a toy train." But Missy was only interested in furry and beautiful toys, and had no interest in toy trains. So she shook her head again. "What should I do?" Little Sheldon had a bitter face. He couldn't think of anything else that could impress Missy. Missy knew little Sheldon's situation very well. She turned her eyes around and finally looked in the direction of the TV and said, "TV, I want control of the TV. How about it? As long as you agree, I will help you solve the problem now." Because of Mary's preference, the control of the Cooper family's TV usually fell on little Sheldon, who was asked to watch the Science and Education channel. TV. Little Sheldon thought for a while and understood what Missy meant. The Science and Education channel is an important way for little Sheldon to acquire knowledge at this stage, and it is very important to him. However, in order to solve the big problem of Barbie, he finally agreed and said, "Okay, then it's settled." Missy cheered and then clapped her hands with little Sheldon. "In the future, don't disturb me watching cartoons again." After making the agreement, Missy also left the door. 10 minutes later, Missy came back happily again. "How is Barbie?" little Sheldon asked in a low voice when he saw Missy coming back. "Done." Missy, who made an okay gesture, replied with a smile. Just after the two exchanged information, the door of the Cooper family was knocked again. "Shelley, go and see if George and the others are back," Mary shouted in the dining room. George and the other two had been gone for so long that the dinner prepared in the dining room was almost cold. Mary's worry was getting worse and worse. She was a little regretful now that she had let her husband go out. On the other side, little Shell, knowing that his troubles had been solved, answered and walked briskly to the door. As the door was opened, little Sheldon, who saw who was coming, screamed and ran around the room. "What's wrong?" A perfect version of the book in 1619. Mary and Grandma Connie, who heard the noise, came out of the dining room. "Barbie, she's here." Little Sheldon hid behind his mother and grandmother and said in panic. At the door, Barbie, with a cute smile on her face, was standing there, holding a small box in her hand. Before Mary could speak to scare the other party, Grandma Connie asked gently, "Barbie, what's the matter?" "I'm looking for Missy," Barbie answered obediently. "Barbie, why are you here?" Missy also saw who was coming and greeted her with surprise. Then, the two little girls came together, holding hands and happily communicating. "Missy, this is a gift from me to you. We can draw together in the future," Barbie said, holding the small box. "They are so beautiful." Missy was very happy to see the colorful crayons inside the small box. Then, she also said, "I have a lot of stuffed toys. I'll take you to see them. By the way, I also have a big pink Barbie doll." "Really?" Hearing that there was a pink Barbie doll, Barbie's eyes sparkled. Then, the two little girls went to Mrs. room hand in hand happily, until Barbie's figure disappeared. Grandma Connie said, "I think Barbie is not as bad as Shelley said." Mary nodded in agreement. Then, the two adults turned around at the same time and looked at the little Sheldon behind them, who was still looking terrified. Then, they shook their heads at the same time. In fact, Barbie, who had a playmate, had not paid attention to little Sheldon since she entered the door. On the other side, the four men in the chicken coop had finished a small bottle of beer accompanied by soothing music. When the four were about to end this strange party, Brenda's voice came from outside the yard. "Herschel, what's wrong?" "Brenda." Herschel heard his wife's call, quickly turned off the music and responded. "Barbie went to Cooper's house. I'm a little worried." "You go and see what's going on," Brenda said worriedly. "Okay, I know. You go back first," Herschel replied. Then, until he heard the footsteps of his wife leaving, Herschel greeted the remaining three people and walked out of the chicken coop. Then, on the way to Cooper's house, Herschel and George tacitly pulled a little distance away. In order to show that they had just had a serious negotiation, the expressions on the faces of the two middle-aged men also became serious at the same time. Chapter 113, Exclusion. "Dad, why are you here too?" Barbie came out of Mrs. room and saw her dad, who also came to the Cooper's house. The little girl happily threw herself into his arms and said proudly, "Do you think this puppy is cute? Missy gave it to me." Barbie held a small white plush toy in her hand, which was a return gift from Missy. It can be seen that the relationship between the two girls progressed rapidly in a very short period of time. Missy, who came out of the room, also found Mike. She said as if to take credit, "Mike, I have helped Sheldon solve the problem. Am I awesome?" Seeing the little girl blinking her big eyes for praise, Mike smiled and rubbed her little head, praising, "Ah, Missy is awesome." Missy, who got the praise as she wished, laughed he. On the other hand, seeing that his daughter got along well with the Cooper family, Herschel was relieved. He first comforted Barbie and then politely talked to the Cooper family before leaving with his daughter. The relationship between the two neighbors has been eased, which is a good start. This also restored the relaxed atmosphere of the past at the Cooper family's table. "You know what, Gretchen?" At noon in the school cafeteria, Katie whispered to Gretchen, who was holding 2 plates of food, "Regina once complained to me that the lunch you gave her was not to her liking at all." Katie, who was determined to sow discord between Regina and everyone, would whisper to Gretchen whenever she had the chance. Gretchen, who had a gentle personality, was the one who was most often sent by the queen bee in the devil body group, which was the main reason why Katie found her. Of course, the information Katie revealed to the other party was also true. With the domineering personality of the queen bee, she could easily point fingers at several people in the devil body group. Not to her liking? Then what does she want to eat? Gretchen, who put down her food and held 2 plates of the same food, seemed to have a lot of emotional fluctuations. Obviously, Katie's uninterrupted provocation during this period has achieved considerable results. But this is also easy to understand. No matter how good a person's personality is, when helping the other person buy water, get food, and carry bags, they will also be picky about the other person. Anyone may not be able to stand it. What's more, as Gretchen fantasizes more about Mike, she will unconsciously feel dissatisfied with Gretchen. This potential change may not even be realized by Gretchen herself. Before the food was placed, looking at Gretchen who was helping the queen bee to serve food, Katie shrugged helplessly, saying that she could not help. The truth is that looking at Gretchen's emotional changes, Katie already had a bottom line in her heart. The opportunity to overthrow the hegemony of the queen bee may be right in front of her. With a bang, Gretchen, who returned to the middle of the cafeteria, put the queen bee lunch heavily in front of the other party, and then sat down at the side of the table without saying a word. What's wrong with her? Regina, who still didn't know the situation, frowned slightly at Gretchen's rude actions. Who knows, maybe Gretchen is not in a good mood today, Katie explained with a smile, looking like she was trying to ease the atmosphere. However, Katie then reminded casually, Regina, today seems to be Wednesday. I know. What's wrong with Wednesday? Regina asked unnaturally. Wednesday is a day when our devil figure group wears short skirts. Katie glanced at the white jeans on the legs of Queen Bee and continued to remind her. Ahem. Regina coughed fakely, then hid her legs under the dining table and explained a little embarrassedly. Actually, I think there is nothing wrong with wearing jeans. At least it is very comfortable. In fact, the reason why Regina wore jeans today was also because she had no choice. She has gained more than 10 pounds recently, and those beautiful clothes and small skirts she used to wear can no longer fit. On the side of the dining table, seeing the jeans on the legs of Queen Bee and listening to her sophistry, Gretchen's long suppressed emotions finally broke out. You are wearing jeans, which violates the best friend code. You are not qualified to sit with us, Gretchen shouted, venting her dissatisfaction. Unexpectedly, the other party would be so emotional. Regina was shocked at first, and then tried to explain, I wear this way for a reason. What reason? Gretchen continued to shout, just because you are Regina and everyone likes you, you cannot abide by the best friend code. Don't forget that the last time I violated the dress code, you severely criticized me and kicked me out of the restaurant. Gretchen said, her eyes were red with grievance. At noon, the cafeteria was crowded, and everyone was attracted by the movement here. Regina, who was in the center of the storm, seemed to be held up at this time. She looked at Karen, who had a silly expression on her face, for help, hoping that this old member of the devil figure group could come out and say something for her. However, the real situation was to disappoint the Queen Bee. Karen looked back and forth between Katie and Regina, as if she understood something. Then, she said calmly, Regina, Gretchen is right. You are wearing jeans today, so you are not qualified to sit with us. I understand. Regina listened to Karen's speech and stood up with her plate. Before leaving, she tried to explain, I also want to wear a short skirt, but I have gained more than 10 pounds and become a fat woman. Forget it. I wish you a happy meal. Noticing the strange looks of other students in the cafeteria, Regina didn't want to stay here for a moment. She walked out of the cafeteria with her plate in disappointment. A perfect version of the book in 1619. Many of the rules in the bestie code were set by Regina herself. Now she also knows that it is unrealistic to want to temporarily win the sympathy of the group members. Look at her thighs. They are so thick, like an elephant. Yes, and her waist, it's like a bucket. PG is also fat like a fat woman. Seeing Regina's back as she left like a loser, the cafeteria rang with exaggerated laughter. It has to be said that Regina, who has a domineering personality, was not very popular in the past. Most of the people who laughed at her were those who had been bullied by her in the past. It can also be said that Regina's current situation is what she deserves. In the middle of the restaurant, with the departure of the Queen Bee, the atmosphere here changed instantly. The remaining 3 members of the Devil Body group breathed a sigh of relief, as if they had accomplished a feat. Katie and Karen looked at each other, as if they had telepathy, and then the corners of the mouths of the 2 girls were slightly raised at the same time. At this time, Mike and his support group just passed by. Hey, Mike, Lina, do you want to have dinner with us? Karen invited with a smile. Now in the school, Mike's support group and the Devil Body group are the most popular. Lina glanced at the smiling Karen and gave the decision to Mike. As for Mike, seeing that Regina was not here, he naturally would not refuse Karen's invitation. So, Mike and Lina sat together with Karen and the others, and the students who were sitting in the middle of the restaurant also made room for the other members of Mike's support group. From then on, Mike and his support group became the most popular group in the school cafeteria. countless male classmates also envied Mike's unique treatment of being the center of attention. Chapter 114 Girls' Thoughts. Regina did not go far. After leaving the cafeteria, she hid at the side door, chewing a weight loss energy bar, while observing the situation in the cafeteria. In the middle of the cafeteria, Mike and the other 3 members of the Devil Body group were chatting and laughing, which she also saw. A bunch of bitches. Regina gnashed her teeth and cursed. Being able to form the Devil Body group into the most popular female team in the school, Queen Bee is naturally not a simple person. After calming down, she also found that today's events were very strange. The 3 people in the team seemed to be targeting her intentionally, and Regina, who carefully sorted out the whole thing, seemed to realize that Katie, who seemed to be the most innocent in the team, was definitely the initiator of the whole thing. Whether the other party did it intentionally or unintentionally, Katie should at least take half of the responsibility for her current situation. Wait for me. Wait until I lose weight successfully, you will be in trouble. Now Regina, by the way, is jealous of the other 3 people in the Devil Body group. She was already thinking about how to return all the humiliation she suffered today after she successfully lost weight and regained her status as the Queen Bee. Slowly, Regina, who was chewing the energy bar, felt the sweetness in her mouth spread, and her previously overly excited mood also calmed down a little. It must be said that when people are depressed, food is definitely the best placebo. But soon, Regina stopped chewing. She suddenly thought that if Katie had bad intentions towards her, then there must be something wrong with the weight loss products she gave her. Looking at the half-finished energy bar in her hand, Regina flipped through it for a few times and was about to throw it into the trash can. But soon, she stopped again. Then, with a twinkling look in her eyes, Regina carefully wrapped up the remaining half of the energy bar and put it away. She planned to go back and carefully check what the weight loss product Katie gave her was. At this time, Regina had already vaguely realized that these weight loss products were definitely not as simple as Katie said. The real culprit for her weight gain was probably due to these things. As time went by, the school lunch time was about to end. See you in the afternoon, Mike. Katie looked at Mike, who was getting up and preparing to leave, and said goodbye to him in a sweet voice. Without the pressure of the Queen Bee, Katie put all her thoughts on Mike again. See you in the afternoon. Mike waved to Katie, exchanged an ambiguous look with Karen, and then walked out with Lina. It can be said that without the interruption of the Queen Bee, Mike enjoyed the blessing of having many people for lunch. That Katie seems to like you very much, Lina whispered after walking out of the cafeteria side by side with Mike. What, are you jealous? Mike asked with a smile, after eating a handful of tofu. No. Lina shook her head and said in a lower voice, you have been getting better and better recently. It would be good to have more sisters to share the pressure. Seeing Lina's sensible appearance, Mike leaned close to her ear and whispered, you are so nice. I will be gentler next time. During the afternoon mathematical Olympiad study, Mike also found that Katie's attitude towards him was becoming more and more earnest. The girl's fiery eyes seemed to want to eat him. Mike, I still don't understand some knowledge points. Can you come to my house to guide me? After the mathematical Olympiad study time was over, Katie invited again with an expectant look. Then, she added in a low voice, my parents are not here today. Although Katie's parents now have their own research institute, they still take some time out from time to go to Africa for field research. No problem, I'm most willing to help. Mike readily agreed to the girl's invitation. Since Katie, this little cabbage, has learned to make up and dress up, her charm has become more and more sufficient. It's time to harvest. Then, the two came to Katie's house tacitly. Sit down for a while, I'll prepare some food, and we'll start studying after dinner. Katie arranged the next steps for the two of them after returning home. Obviously, the girl needed some time to prepare herself mentally before handing herself over. Okay, everything is up to you. Mike lay down on the sofa, looked at the girl's blushing face and nodded. 10 minutes later, Katie prepared some cooked food and bread and put them in front of Mike. Wait a minute, I'll get you a glass of milk, Katie said, and then walked towards the kitchen shyly. In the previous time, Katie not only prepared food, she also took the time to go to her room and changed into a very homely outfit. She was already in good shape, wearing a close-fitting white t-shirt on her upper body and a pair of very short white shorts on her lower body. A simple outfit showed the girl's beautiful side. Next, the girl walked towards Mike with a glass of milk that was about to overflow. When she walked in front of Mike, Katie seemed to have tripped, and she screamed, spilling all the milk in the air. The incident happened so suddenly that Mike didn't have time to react. With a scream, a whole cup of milk poured steadily on Katie's clothes. The girl covered her vital parts and shivered a few times and said shyly, "Sorry, I'll go to tidy it up." After that, the girl blushed and ran into the bathroom. "So it's a vacuum," Mike muttered. His eyes became hot. The cup of milk just now will soak all the clothes in front of the girl, showing her good figure. Obviously, Katie used all the ideas given by her friends Janice and Amine before, but made some changes in the implementation. The milk that was originally intended to be poured on Mike, she poured it all on herself. How could Mike not understand the girl's thoughts? So, listening to the sound of running water in the sink, he called home to ask for leave. "You're not coming back tonight." "What happened, Mike?" Connie's grandmother asked with concern on the phone. "Nothing, I'm staying at my classmate's house tonight," Mike answered. At this time, Katie's voice came from the bathroom. "Mike, I forgot to take my clothes. Can you go to my room and get me one?" "Okay, I'll go right away," Mike answered, and then put the phone close to his ear and said, "That's it, Grandma Connie, I'll hang up first." "Wait, I think I heard a girl's voice." Grandma Connie gossiped on the phone. "Mike, the person you're staying with tonight is a female classmate, right?" Mike said speechlessly. "I have something else to do. I'll explain it to you when I get back. Pay attention to safety protection." At the same time as the phone was hung up, Connie's grandmother's teasing admonition came from the receiver. Chapter 115 Interview. Mike went to the girl's room, picked up a t-shirt at random, and then went to the bathroom and knocked on the door. With a whoosh, the bathroom door opened wide, and the girl wrapped in a bath towel appeared in front of Mike. Along with the mist in the bathroom, the girl's white skin was still rolling with water droplets, and the delicate expression on her face was enough to make any man's blood boil. "You're here," Katie said softly, and then stretched out her hand, as if to take the clothes. But as the girl's hands left, the whole bath towel slipped off her body like peeling an onion. This time, the girl did not scream, but looked at Mike with a foolish look. With beauty in front of him, how could he bear it? Mike immediately transformed from a gentleman into a werewolf. Fierce fighting sounds rang out in the bathroom. It must be said that Katie is worthy of being a child who grew up in the wilds of Africa. In terms of initial combat ability, she is better than Lina, who is learning dance. Charm attribute plus 20, physique main attribute plus 2, memory palace, characteristic, intelligence attribute plus 1. Memory palace. In the mental space, a large storage room is opened up. It can store pictures, sounds, colors, tastes and other information. It is indeed a treasure girl. After a round of battle, Mike counted his gains. He didn't expect Katie to give him such a big surprise. Mike was still thinking about whether he could get something like Memory Palace from little Sheldon. As a result, it is now a mixed bag. But this is understandable. Katie has received family education since she was a child. As a result, she has kept up with the school's learning progress not long after entering school, and she has also shown a superior talent in mathematics. It is unreasonable to say that Katie has nothing special. Mike, who received such a great benefit, also gently carried the girl who was limp beside him into the room carefully. The next day, Mike, who ate Katie, also showed some closeness to the girl at school. At noon in the cafeteria, this time Mike brought Lina and sat at the same table with the 3 members of the Devil Body group. "Katie, you look really good today," Gretchen praised sincerely. Yes, after careful care, Katie looked very good today, and her skin was much smoother and more radiant than usual. Karen and Lina at the table had all experienced this change. Now, the way they looked at Katie was also much more friendly. It was as if they were looking at their own people. Only Gretchen was still kept in the dark. Really? Katie thought of what happened last night. Her face blushed unnaturally, and then she explained guiltily, "I recently found a very good skincare product." After saying that, Katie glared at Mike with resentment. She was tormented by him last night. Really? Katie, what product do you use? Can you recommend it to me? Gretchen asked, not knowing what was going on. Girls have a strong curiosity about beauty. Katie paused for a long time before she said awkwardly, this product is not easy to buy. Let's talk about it next time. Okay. Gretchen was a little disappointed, but she didn't say anything more. Then, the girls chatted about other topics. Katie, who had escaped, looked at Mike who was eating lunch, as if nothing had happened across from her, and couldn't help but step on his foot under the table. Mike, who got the advantage of the girl's temper, gave a gentle smile in response. On the other hand, Regina also learned from her family last night that what Katie gave her was not a weight loss product at all. Those energy drinks and energy bars are high-calorie foods used by athletes to gain weight. Regina, who understood the situation, also realized that Katie didn't really want to join the devil body group from the beginning, but came to ruin herself. Regina, who had been holding back her anger for the whole morning, was now walking towards the cafeteria with great momentum. She wanted to unveil Katie's hypocritical mask in front of everyone. You little bitch, Regina rushed straight to Katie after entering the cafeteria. While scolding, she took out a handful of energy bars from her pocket and threw them at Katie's head. Fortunately, Mike was quick-witted and protected Katie with his arms. Then, he stood up in front of Regina and asked, what do you want to do? At this time, Katie looked at Regina's angry expression and didn't know that her little action was exposed. But now that Mike helped her, Katie also hid behind her. What do I want to do? Regina, who was already angry, was even more furious when she saw Katie's intimate actions of leaning against Mike's back. She roared like crazy, she is a shameless little bitch. As she said that, Regina took out a bottle of energy drink from her pocket, opened the lid, and was about to pour it on Katie. What are you crazy about? Mike grabbed Regina's wrist and took the drink from her hand. Regardless of who is right or wrong, now that Katie has become his woman, Mike will not let anyone hurt her. Read the correct version on the 16-9 book forum. The members of Mike's support group next to him also stood up and stared at the troublemaker queen bee with bad eyes. The students eating in the cafeteria were also shocked by the noise here. Many people were in a good mood and speculated that Regina was taking revenge on Katie because she lost her position in the devil figure group. Some people also speculated that Katie stole Mike and annoyed Regina. Janice and Damien, who were eating at the edge of the cafeteria, also found that Katie was in a bad situation. So, the two of them rushed over and separated Regina. Punk girl Janice glared at Regina and said, I gave those products to Katie. If you want to cause trouble, come to me. As mentioned earlier, Janice and Regina have a deep old grudge. At this moment, seeing Regina's furious look, Janice felt that she had let out a sigh of relief. You guys just wait. Things won't end so easily. Regina saw that everyone was protecting Katie and knew that she couldn't do anything to her now, so she said something harsh and left the cafeteria angrily. You weren't scared, were you? Mike turned around and asked Katie after seeing Regina leave. The queen bee's aggressive look before was indeed a bit scary. I'm fine. Katie shook her head after hearing Mike's concern. What's going on? Mike continued to ask the girl. Katie was about to confess to Mike, but she saw Janice winking at her from the opposite side. I'll tell you later, okay? Katie also realized that what she had done to Regina before was very shameful. Confessing to Mike suddenly would probably cause the other party to be disgusted. It's okay, it doesn't matter if you don't want to say it, Mike said casually. In fact, he was not interested in the conflicts between girls. If it wasn't related to Katie, he wouldn't have asked about it. On the other hand, seeing that Katie didn't make a fool of herself and revealed the matter, Janice, who wanted to take the whole thing, nodded to Katie implicitly and then pulled Damien out of the center of the cafeteria. For Janice and Damien, who were marginalized people in the school, it was actually not easy to be in the spotlight. The students in the cafeteria, who had watched another good show, saw Regina leave in defeat again. Some gossip about Regina also slowly spread among the crowd. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. we cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 116 Interview, continued. After the Mathematical Olympiad study in the afternoon, when the other members of the Mathematical Olympiad team left, only Katie and Mike were left in the classroom. Katie looked at the handsome and gentle Mike beside her, and seemed to be hesitant to speak. Since Regina's incident in the cafeteria at noon, Katie has been thinking about whether to confess to Mike about the bad things she has done. What Katie did to Regina before was not glorious, which made the girl very worried that Mike would hate her after knowing those things. The girl who just gained happiness is now in an uneasy mood of gain and loss, and she is very afraid of losing it. Let's go, Katie. I'll take you home. Mike hugged the girl and said with a smile. This week, Katie's parents will be inspecting in Africa. Mike will naturally not miss such a good opportunity to be alone with the girl. Moreover, Mike also noticed the girl's emotional uneasiness. For this situation, Mike can only say that he will use practical actions to make the other party feel at ease. Mike. Katie grabbed Mike's mischievous hand and asked seriously, if you find out that I'm not as good as I look, but a bad girl, will you hate me? Mike looked at the girl's apprehensive look, shook his head slightly, and comforted her. Katie, no matter what you look like, I will always like you. Seeing Mike's sincere eyes, Katie was a little moved. At this moment, she decided to confess her affairs with Regina to the other party. Mike, the truth is Just when Katie wanted to confess, a boy came to the door of the classroom. Mike, Regina asked you to meet alone on the rooftop. She has something to say to you. Although Regina has lost her dominant position in the devil figure group, she still has many fans in the school. The male student who came to report the news was obviously one of the admirers of Queen Bee. I know, facing the envious, jealous, and hateful eyes of the boy, Mike waved his hand and let the other party leave. Can I not go? After the man left, Katie pulled Mike's arm, with a begging look in her expression. She was now very afraid that Regina would expose what she had done to Mike. It's okay, it's better to go and meet her. I want to see what the Queen Bee has done, Mike said to comfort the girl. When Regina left at noon, it was obvious that she would come to trouble Katie again. Now that Katie has become his own, Mike will naturally help her with her affairs. By the way, what did you want to say just now? Mike asked before leaving. No, nothing. Being interrupted by someone, Katie lost most of her courage to confess before. At this moment, she had an ostrich mentality and just wanted to hide herself. Okay, seeing that the girl didn't want to say it, Mike didn't force it. Then, he kissed the girl on the face and said, wait for me here first. After meeting Regina, we will go home together. After that, Mike gave the girl a smile that they both understood. After comforting the girl, Mike left the Mathematical Olympiad study room and went all the way to the rooftop along the corridor. On the rooftop, Regina was looking into the distance. Looking at her expression at this time, her emotions were much more stable than at noon. What do you want to talk to me about, Regina? Mike asked. You're here. Regina turned around and saw the person coming and first showed a decent smile. Then, she said casually, actually, there's nothing. I just want to talk to you casually. Seeing that the other party was deliberately mysterious, Mike smiled and didn't say anything else, completely looking like please start your performance. Well, actually I want to remind you that Katie is not a good girl. Then, Regina told all the things that Katie tricked her into eating weight loss products. Then what? What do you want to express? Mike asked calmly. Knowing Katie's true face, don't you have any other ideas? Seeing that the other party who was provoking had no reaction, Regina couldn't hold back the smile on her face. This is her own business, what can I think about it? Mike said, and then seemed to react suddenly. If you want to apologize, I can apologize to you on behalf of Katie. Seeing that Mike was obviously protecting Katie, the smile on Regina's face disappeared. She frowned, thought for a while, and then said, you don't know yet, there was a kind of witchcraft popular in Africa. As long as you get something related to someone, you can bewitch that person. Regina stared at the change in Mike's expression and continued. As far as I know, Katie once collected your picture magazines crazily. Think about it, she may have used those picture magazines to bewitch you. Witchcraft, or witchcraft, is no different from a disgusting virus to materialistic Americans. Anything related to these things is considered evil. And people who are related to these things are also regarded as evil freaks. On the other hand, watching the other party's clumsy performance, Mike even wanted to laugh. He shook his head and said, "Is this all you want to say? If there is nothing else, I will leave first." Mike still wanted to seize the opportunity to have a deeper exchange with Katie, but he didn't have time to accompany Regina here. Seeing that Mike was really leaving, Regina was anxious. Read the correct version in 1619 book bar. Wait, Regina shouted, straightened her waist, and walked towards Mike in a cat-like manner. Maybe we can make a deal. Not to mention, even if Regina gained more than 10 pounds, her figure could only be described as plump at best. On the contrary, this kind of just right plumpness would be very comfortable to use in Mike's opinion. "Oh, tell me, what kind of deal do you want to make with me?" Mike asked with a smile, admiring the other parties pretending to be charming. Looking at Mike's scrutinizing eyes, Regina cursed in her heart. However, she did not show her dissatisfaction on her face, because she had something to ask of her. After leaning forward slightly and showing a white concave in front of her body, Regina said seductively, "As long as you help me deal with Katie, you can do anything you want to me." As she said that, Regina stuck out her tongue and licked her lips teasingly. The meaning was obvious. The object of the transaction this time was herself. "Sorry, I'm not interested." Mike refused decisively and expressed his attitude. "Also, put away your little thoughts and don't let me know that you are targeting Katie behind her back. Otherwise, you don't want to know the consequences." After that, Mike no longer paid attention to Regina's ugly expression and turned to leave the rooftop. Damn stinky man. After Mike left for a while, Regina seemed to be insulted and her face became more gloomy. She looked at her chubby figure and began to doubt her charm. Then, Regina thought that all this was thanks to Katie, and she couldn't swallow this breath. While the queen bee was helpless and furious, Mike had already returned to the mathematical Olympiad study room and saw Katie, who was in a nervous mood. "Katie, we should go," Mike shouted at the door. Katie saw Mike coming back so quickly and ran into his arms. "Regina, didn't I say anything to you?" Katie asked in a low voice, smelling the familiar smell on the other person. "Nothing." Mike shook his head and then reminded, "Pay more attention to Regina during this period. If you have any problems, be sure to tell me." Seeing Mike's concerned expression, Katie's mood suddenly improved. She decided to reward her tonight. Chapter 117 Staying at school. 2 more days passed. During these 2 days, Mike said hello to Grandma Connie and stayed at Katie's house. After the girl's first experience, her fighting power was obviously improved. With more blessings, her complexion was getting better and better. This made Gretchen envious. That afternoon, little George suddenly brought his father to the mathematical Olympiad study room. Mike walked out of the classroom, looked at George's anxious expression, and asked, "What happened?" Although Mike didn't go home these 2 days, he also learned from Grandma Connie that George went to the sporting goods store to apply for a job. He got the job of a salesperson from the Bostel. This time period should be the time for George to start his new job. "Do you know where Shelley is?" George asked directly. The fact that little Sheldon pretended to be sick in the past 2 weeks was accidentally leaked by his chess teacher and class teacher, Miss Elizabeth, during a chat. Come to think of it, little Sheldon was still healthy in class in the morning, and in the afternoon he bandaged his arm and pretended to have a broken arm and went to the chess teacher to ask for leave. This outrageous approach may be effective in the short term. As time goes by, it is inevitable that the truth will be revealed. "Shouldn't he be in the chess club?" Mike asked in confusion. Seeing Mike's reaction, George shook his head and said, "Let George tell you about the situation." So George told him about Sheldon asking for help. Then, he said with a guilty conscience, "I thought Sheldon just wanted to take a day or 2 off, but I didn't expect that he didn't go to the afternoon group activities for the past 2 weeks." George didn't know what stupid thing Sheldon had done until he called home. If he had known that Sheldon would skip so many classes, George would never have dared to give him bad advice. Seeing the equally anxious expressions of George and his son, Mike helped analyze. Sheldon skipped the afternoon chess club activities and didn't go home, so he is likely hiding somewhere in the school. Yes, George's eyes lit up and then asked, where would he hide? Sheldon skipping classes was also related to George, and he certainly hoped that the matter would be resolved as soon as possible. Let me think about it. Mike closed his eyes and meditated under the expectant gaze of George and his son. It is known that Sheldon escaped from group activities in order to learn the knowledge of the 12th grade. Then he will definitely find a place where he can study without being disturbed. Some time ago, in order to facilitate his communication with Karen and Lina at any time, Mike also explored the hidden corners of the school for a while. Mike, who has the memory palace, went through these places in his mind and used the elimination method to determine the best place under the dark light. That place completely meets the needs of Sheldon. Come with me. If nothing goes wrong, I know where Sheldon is hiding. Mike opened his eyes and said, really? Little George looked at Mike and thought for a while with his eyes closed and guessed where Sheldon was hiding, which was very magical. Mike did not explain too much. He took George and his son directly to the first floor, the stairwell under the stairs. Are you sure it's here? Little George asked uncertainly. He and his father passed by here many times before in order to find Sheldon. You'll know if you go in and take a look, Mike said. The stairwell on the first floor was used to store sundries before, but now it is in a semi-abandoned state, and few people pay attention to it. George didn't think too much about it. Out of trust in Mike, he decisively pushed open the small door of the stairwell. Sure enough, among a pile of abandoned tables, chairs, and benches, there was a small figure, studying hard under the light of the desk lamp. Shelly, George shouted in a low voice. Little Sheldon was awakened from his study state. After seeing who was coming, he asked in surprise, why are you here? Why don't you participate in group activities? George asked angrily. In the United States, if a student deliberately avoids group activities in school, he will be regarded as a freak and excluded by everyone. George doesn't want his little son to get into trouble because of this little thing. Are you talking about the National Flag Chess Club? Little Sheldon said seriously. Their level is too low. I can't learn anything there. It's better to take time to learn what I want to learn. With little Sheldon's high IQ, the members of the chess club, including the instructor, are not challenging at all. Little Sheldon, who has lost interest, will only suffer there. By the way, Mike, I have basically finished reading the knowledge of the 12th grade. Can you find me some Olympiad exercise books to look at? Little Sheldon asked as a matter of course, not noticing George's angry expression on the side. A correct version in the 16-9 book bar. No problem. If you want, I can ask teacher Sharon to see if he can let you audit the Olympiad team. Mike responded. During this time, Mike also found that, although teacher Sharon looked old-fashioned, he was still easy to talk to. Audit? It sounds good. Little Sheldon said with bright eyes. He thought that, after going to the Olympiad team, he would have another chance to compete with Mike. Shelley, you can't go anywhere now. You have to come with me to Miss Elizabeth. George saw that his youngest son didn't realize his mistake at all, and his tone suddenly became stern. Then, little George was fine, and returned to the football team. George and Mike accompanied little Sheldon to Elizabeth's office. Sheldon, can you explain to me why you lied? Miss Elizabeth asked with a frown in the head teacher's office. This is a white lie. It can give me more time to enrich my brain. Little Sheldon brought out the countermeasures he had thought of from the beginning. However, Miss Elizabeth didn't buy it at all. She asked seriously and directly, do you know that lying is wrong? Of course, lying is wrong. Little Sheldon nodded and then said stubbornly, but I lied for my own reasons, and it can't be considered wrong. Seeing that little Sheldon was still defending himself, Miss Elizabeth said impatiently, okay, Sheldon, I know. Since you don't admit your mistakes, I decided to keep you in school for 3 days. After talking about the punishment for little Sheldon, Miss Elizabeth turned to George and asked, Mr. George, do you have any objections to this decision? No, George replied, then looked at his youngest son and said, this punishment is very good. Little Sheldon's behavior of not admitting his mistakes, in George's opinion, should be taught a lesson. Very good, then it's decided. Ms. Elizabeth finally said, starting from today, until the end of this week, there are exactly 3 days left. After school in the afternoon of these 3 days, Sheldon needs to stay in school for an extra hour, to learn the school rules. Hearing the content of the punishment, little Sheldon felt guilty. You know, students who need to stay in school are not good people. Little Sheldon didn't have the courage to stay alone with those bad students. So he whispered, Ms. Elizabeth, if I memorize all the school rules, can I leave early? No, Ms. Elizabeth refused firmly and continued, you can go. As a radical feminist, being alone with 3 men made her very uncomfortable. Chapter 118, Difficulties. After dealing with Sheldon, when Mike returned to the mathematical Olympiad team, teacher Sharon did not ask any more questions and let him into the classroom. Mike, what happened? Katie asked quietly when she saw Mike coming back. It's okay, it's all solved. Mike shook his head slightly, signaling the girl to listen carefully. Teacher Sharon had already cast his eyes on Katie and Mike because of their whispering in front of the blackboard. Katie was still quite scared of teacher Sharon's serious and old-fashioned look, so she smiled at the teacher apologetically and then quickly adjusted her learning attitude. The next time was also spent slowly, while teacher Sharon analyzed the knowledge points of the mathematical Olympiad. When the mathematical Olympiad study time was over, Mike quickly got up and called the teacher who was about to leave. What's the matter, Mike? Teacher Sharon asked puzzledly. After more than a week of study, teacher Sharon has fully realized Mike's talent in learning. The other party called him. It should not be a problem with learning. This is indeed the case. Mike's intelligence has now reached 160. For ordinary people, it is not an exaggeration to call him a super genius. Although, Mike is still far behind Sheldon's IQ of 187. However, the knowledge points of the high school Olympiad mathematics are no longer difficult for him. Teacher Sharon, I want to ask, can Sheldon join our Olympiad mathematics team? Mike stated his purpose. Sheldon, is that the little prodigy? Teacher Sharon asked. Sheldon's reputation as a child prodigy is quite famous in the school. Originally, the spot in the Olympiad mathematics team in the 11th grade was reserved for him. Who knew that in that math surprise test, Sheldon made a mistake? The spot in the Olympiad mathematics team was naturally taken away by Mike, who showed up halfway. On this side, Mike nodded when he heard the teacher's question. Now the 5 spots in the Olympiad mathematics team are full. Teacher Sharon told the truth. Just when Mike was about to persuade the other party, teacher Sharon thought for a moment and continued. However, if it is Sheldon, he can come as an auditor. The mathematical Olympiad will not be held for only 1 year. Letting little Sheldon join now can also be seen as recruiting talents for next year's mathematical Olympiad team. After all, Kevin and others are all 12th grade students. Next year, they will leave Melford for further studies. That's great. Mike smiled. He has now fulfilled his previous promise to little Sheldon. Don't be happy too early. Teacher Sharon said strictly. Tomorrow I still need to examine Sheldon's true level before deciding whether he is qualified to stay. Of course Mike had no objection to this. With little Sheldon's ability, it should be very simple to examine intelligence, as long as he wants to stay. After saying goodbye to teacher Sharon, Mike went home with Katie and enjoyed a happy world of 2 people. On the other side, little Sheldon, who was detained at school, was not so good. When he came to the large classroom for detention, there were already more than 10 people gathered here. Excuse me, little Sheldon sat in the middle of the first row of the classroom as usual, and asked carefully, when will the moral education teacher come? The classroom was quiet for a moment, because of little Sheldon's question. Then, a burly German youth stood up and shouted exaggeratedly, he said the moral education teacher. Everyone in the classroom exchanged glances and laughed exaggeratedly. The young man also came to little Sheldon amid laughter. He looked down at little Sheldon and said with a smile, my name is Kemet. Hello, Kemet. Little Sheldon looked up and stuttered, my name is Sheldon. Sheldon Lee Cooper, nice to meet you. Little Sheldon forced a smile and noticed the students who were still laughing next to him and asked in confusion, what are they laughing at? Don't mind this little problem. Kemet acted familiar. You want to know where the moral education teacher is, right? Little Sheldon nodded quickly. As far as he knew, after students were detained, there would be special moral education teachers to educate these people ideologically. No one will come to take care of us, Kemet said with a smile, and he looked a little proud. Why? Little Sheldon asked back. There is no why. Kemet put away the smile on his face, as if he didn't want to say more on this issue. Then, he changed the subject and continued. Sheldon, right? I know you. I want your help with something. What is it? Little Sheldon asked cautiously. You know, Sheldon didn't know the person in front of him before, and he didn't think he could help him. I heard that you seem to have a good relationship with Mike, who is in the limelight recently. Kemet said, so, after school tomorrow, can you help me make an appointment with him at the school gate? A correct version in 1619 book bar. Sheldon's brain short-circuited for a moment, and he didn't react yet. Do you want to get to know Mike? That's very simple. I can take you to see him directly tomorrow. Obviously, Sheldon misunderstood now. He thought Kemet made an appointment with Mike to become friends with him. However, the fact is just the opposite. Kemet waved his hands comically and said, no, that's not what I mean. I just want to see each other at the gate after school tomorrow. Kemet and Mike have no intersection at all, and there is no possibility of grudges between the two. However, things are so coincidental. Kemet is a fan of Regina, and Mike doesn't like Regina very much. So, it can be said that the two have an intersection because of Regina. Not to mention, the Queen Bee also mentioned in front of Kemet that she was not getting along with Mike. Overall, Mike was undeservedly hurt and was hated because of Regina. Of course, it can also be understood that Mike has a face that makes people jealous. In addition, he is too popular in school recently. So, naturally, some people will not like him. And the little Sheldon who was staying in the classroom also understood Kemet's ill intentions. He said tentatively, can I not help you with this favor? What do you think? Kemet showed a kind smile. Well, looking at the other party's strong physique, little Sheldon agreed to the other party's request from the heart. As the saying goes, a good man does not suffer a loss in front of him. Moreover, based on little Sheldon's understanding of Mike, the other party will not necessarily suffer a loss after meeting Kemet. Come to think of it, little Sheldon was at the scene and watched Mike's football game several times. Mike's powerful performances left a deep impression on little Sheldon. Here, Kemet saw that Sheldon agreed to his request, so he did not embarrass him. The two sides seemed to have reached a tacit agreement not to interfere with each other during the stay. Chapter 119, Fight. Looking at the trembling little Sheldon, Kemet continued to smile and said, it doesn't matter if you can't come up with it. You still have another choice. What is it? Little Sheldon was scared to tears. I heard that you are very familiar with Mike in school. Kemet showed his foxtail. Mike's popularity among girls in school can easily cause dissatisfaction among some boys, and Kemet happens to be one of them. It just so happens that Kemet is also one of Regina's fans. And recently, Regina has clearly hinted to him that she wants to deal with Mike. So, when he saw little Sheldon, Kemet had a bold plan, a plan that can deal with Mike and please his goddess at the same time. Mike is my friend. What do you want to talk to him about? Little Sheldon obviously felt something was wrong. He continued to add, Mike used to be the quarterback of the football team. He has a very violent personality. You'd better not mess with him. Don't worry about it. Kemet said, after school tomorrow, either help me to meet Mike at the school gate, or get ready. After saying that, he waved his hand without giving little Sheldon time to react, and left the classroom. Only little Sheldon was left alone, in a daze. It was not until an hour later that little Sheldon walked out of the campus in a daze. After returning home, little Sheldon still looked out of shape after the family dinner. George only thought that his youngest son's abnormal behavior was a sign of dissatisfaction with the detention, so he didn't pay much attention to it. However, little George found some problems. He pulled little Sheldon into his room and asked, what happened after school? As a poor student in the school, little George had also been detained at school. He knew the character of those people very well. Little Sheldon hesitated for a while, but still chose to tell everything. Kemet? He's not a good person. He must have no good intentions when he comes to Mike. Little George frowned, thought for a while, and said, "Why don't you give me money? How much do you have?" Little Sheldon, who had just made a deal with Missy, said that he couldn't take out a penny. "That's difficult." Little George searched for a long time and only managed less than 10 million yuan. The Cooper family's financial situation has become increasingly tight recently, so naturally they won't give the children much pocket money. "Or, you tell Mike about this, he should have a solution," Little George suggested. "I think so too. That bad student named Kemet, this time it is very likely that he is going after Mike." It must be said that little Sheldon is very smart. When he calmed down a little, he could easily think that there was something fishy about this matter. In this case, it can only be said that this time little Sheldon's luck was very bad, and he just happened to catch the opportunity to be affected. It can be imagined that, even if little Sheldon didn't stay in school, Kemet, who wanted to please Regina, would think of other ways to deal with Mike. The next afternoon, Mike took Sheldon to the mathematical Olympiad study room as agreed. Because it was just a simple test to determine the qualification, the mathematical Olympiad test paper that teacher Sharon gave Sheldon was not too difficult. And Sheldon, who was already very smart, had learned a lot of mathematical Olympiad knowledge from Mike in advance. This time, he naturally got full marks as he wished. Then, under the satisfied eyes of teacher Sharon, Sheldon was qualified to audit the mathematical Olympiad team. This audit qualification became very important for Sheldon, who did not like sports. This meant that he only needed to come to the mathematical Olympiad team to study in the future, even if he had participated in the collective activities of the school in the afternoon. "What's wrong, Sheldon? You don't seem so happy to be an auditor," Mike asked, looking at Sheldon who was sitting on the other side of him. According to his observation, Sheldon seemed to be out of shape today and looked very worried. Sheldon was about to tell Mike about the troubles he encountered, but he saw the stern eyes of teacher Sharon staring at him from above the podium. So, he could only whisper and quickly say, "Mike, after school this afternoon, I have something I want to ask you for help." Okay, although Mike didn't know what trouble the other party had encountered, he nodded and agreed. Then, he heard teacher Sharon on the podium shouting sternly, "Be quiet, if you have anything to say, talk after class." Another mathematical Olympiad study was over, and Mike found little Sheldon and asked, "Okay, now you can tell me what trouble you have encountered again." Little Sheldon, who didn't get the protection fee, now had only one choice. So, he told Mike everything about his experience after school yesterday. And he also told his guess. "Is that so?" Mike pondered for a while. He was sure that he didn't know Kemet at all, and the other party's behavior might have other reasons. But since the other party chose to provoke him, Mike would naturally not be polite. A correct version in the 16-9 book bar. "Okay, Sheldon, I will go to the school gate and solve the problem. Don't worry," Mike said. "Really?" Little Sheldon breathed a sigh of relief, and then said worriedly, "Be careful, the other person looks very strong." "It's okay, I'm stronger than him." Mike smiled indifferently, and then walked towards the school gate accompanied by Katie. At this time, at the school gate, Kemet was gathered here. This behavior attracted some timid students to take a detour. Of course, there were more students standing not far away, watching the excitement. Kemet had a bad reputation in the school, and some students were also curious about which unlucky guy he targeted today. "Mike, I remember who Kemet is." When they were about to reach the school gate, Katie suddenly said, "He seems to be a repeater of the 12th grade last year, and he often brings a group of people to do bad things. He asked you out this time, it must be bad." "Don't worry, don't you know my ability?" Mike said. "Maybe someone will be unlucky today, but I can guarantee that person will definitely not be me." After comforting Katie, Mike left the girl in the outer circle and walked towards Kemet alone. The students who were waiting to watch the excitement seemed to realize something after seeing Mike's actions, and their faces showed surprise. "Your name is Kemet?" Mike walked in front of a group of people, stared at the obviously much stronger white youth in the front, and asked, "What do you want from me?" Seeing that Mike really confronted Kemet, the students who were watching the excitement on the side burst into a burst of noise. Among them, Lina saw that the situation was not right, and quickly summoned a dozen girls from Mike's fan club to help Mike. the fighting power of girls is sometimes stronger than that of men. For example, now, the accusations of a dozen girls almost made Kemet unable to raise his head. Kemet, who was so annoyed by the noise, roared, "Little white face, you only know how to hide behind a woman. Little white face? Who taught you to say that?" Mike felt a little funny. If the other party had seen his performance on the football field, he would definitely not say that. Moreover, Mike would not let the girls in his fan club stand in front. So he gave Lena a look, signaling her to take people out of the way. Seeing the girls protecting Mike make way, Kemet breathed a sigh of relief and shouted, "You still have some guts then." He continued, "We won't bully you today. As long as you defeat me, you can leave safely." Chapter 120 Battle. Just when Kemet was feeling proud, there was a commotion outside the crowd, and then a group of school football team members walked in under the leadership of Aaron. At this time, George, who was following Aaron, raised his eyebrows at Mike. Obviously, the reason why the football team came here might be all due to him. "Mike, didn't you join the school's math team? How did you offend Kemet?" Aaron asked after he greeted Mike. "How should I know? Maybe I'm too handsome, which makes people jealous." Mike shrugged, looking like he was too good. "You kid." Aaron laughed and hit Mike's shoulder, and then looked at the gang of hooligans opposite. "Kemet, no matter what you want to do today, draw a line and I'll take it." Aaron can be regarded as a celebrity in the 12th grade, and he has some understanding of the style of Kemet and his gang. With Captain Aaron taking the lead, all the members of the rugby team who were still wearing protective gear looked at Kemet, and others with unfriendly eyes. "This matter has nothing to do with you." Kemet felt a little uneasy when he saw all the members of the rugby team helping Mike. However, when he saw the familiar figure at the outermost edge of the crowd, he still shouted with gritted teeth, "Mike, are you just hiding behind others and being a softie? If you are a man, do you dare to have a one-on-one fight with me?" After saying that, Kemet deliberately straightened his chest to show his manly side. At this moment, Regina, who was in the outermost corner of the crowd, was watching the conflict at the school gate with interest. Although, she was not optimistic about Kemet and others at all. But in the eyes of the queen bee, being able to have someone fight for her also proved that her charm was still there. On the other hand, how could Mike tolerate being called a softie by others? So, after communicating with Aaron, he also asked the other party to take his people to the side. "Okay, don't you want to fight one-on-one? Let's start now. I'm in a hurry." Mike hooked his finger casually and said. Seeing the football team helping Mike before, Kemet was a little scared. As a result, now that he saw that his provocation actually worked, his face regained its fierce expression. "You asked for it," Kemet shouted and rushed towards Mike. The reason why Kemet could become the leader of the school's gangsters is naturally his uniqueness. About 1.9 meters tall, with a big head and thick neck, he looks very deterrent. On the side, little George saw that the battle was about to start and said worriedly, "Mike won't suffer any loss, right?" "Don't worry," Captain Aaron said easily. "Mike has a record of knocking down dozens of people in a game. Kemet can't be his opponent at all." In fact, Captain Aaron brought people here this time not because he was worried that Mike would suffer any loss, but because he had his own little thoughts. As the captain of the football team, he wanted to see if there was a chance to bring Mike back to the team. Just as the battle was about to start, a small figure, holding a small stone in his hand, squeezed into the crowd. "Mike, I'm here to help you," little Sheldon shouted loudly to give himself courage. Looking at little Sheldon, whose legs couldn't stop shaking, but still chose to stand up, Mike cast an approving look. Without waiting for little George to come forward to stop him, little Sheldon looked at the tall Kemet and shouted, "I'm not afraid of you." While shouting, little Sheldon threw the small stone in his hand. Then, in the surprised eyes of everyone, the stone the size of a fingernail drew a beautiful arc and hit Kemet's forehead steadily. In such a serious occasion, such a funny scene suddenly happened, and the students who came to watch couldn't help laughing. It can be said that little Sheldon's behavior is not very harmful, but it is very insulting. Hearing the laughter around him, Kemet realized what had just happened. He touched his forehead, which seemed to be bitten by a mosquito, and roared at Sheldon, "I'm going to kill you, Mike. I'll leave it to you next. Sheldon looked at Kemet's ferocious expression, screamed, and turned and disappeared into the crowd. Don't try to run, kid, Kemet roared, and was about to chase him out. Mike was also amused by Sheldon's series of actions. He shook his head, stopped in front of the angry Kemet, and said, "Your opponent is me." In just a moment, Sheldon had already rushed out of the crowd and ran away. Kemet, who had lost his target, immediately stared at Mike with red eyes. "Very good, you succeeded in angering me." Obviously, he blamed all the offensive behavior of Sheldon on Mike. After saying that, Kemet swung his fist and hit Mike's handsome face. He wanted to smash this enviable face. From a psychological point of view, watching beautiful things being destroyed in front of your eyes will give people a perverted pleasure. Kemet is probably in this state of mind now. But his plan soon fell through, and the fist he swung out was easily caught by Mike. Check out the correct version on the 16:9 book forum. You have so little ability, and you dare to take the initiative to cause trouble for others? Mike said as he slowly exerted force on his hands. Since his physical fitness exceeded 200, Mike found that he seemed to have broken through a layer of human shackles. Strength, speed, and agility have reached a whole new level. Strictly speaking, based on his physical fitness alone, Mike is now considered a superhuman. As Mike gradually exerted force, Kemet fell to his knees on the ground, and the expression on his face was full of pain in his hideousness. "Let go, it's going to break." Kemet was in so much pain that tears and snot flowed out. After realizing how powerful Mike was, Kemet unconsciously felt fear in his heart. Once this emotion appeared, it was out of control. Kemet now regretted it. If things could be done again, whether for the sake of a man's face or to please the goddess, it would not be enough for him to cause trouble for Mike, the evil star. On the other side, Mike looked at Kemet's tearful appearance and thought that this farce should end. Then, as he squeezed hard, a slight sound of bone friction was heard amid Kemet's amazing scream. "Go away." Mike let go of his hand, and then kicked Kemet in front of his accomplices. The gangsters were also intimidated by Mike's ruthlessness. They didn't dare to say a word. They carried Kemet, who was unconscious, and left the campus in disgrace. As Kemet and his group left, the students who were watching the excitement cheered. In the United States, what people love to see most is personal heroism. Mike's performance just now was enough to win everyone's admiration. In the eyes of the students, Mike's action of breaking Kemet's wrist just now was very handsome. But only Mike himself knew that he had just crushed Kemet's entire hand bone with absolute strength. Coupled with the last kick, Kemet would have to stay in the hospital for at least 3 months. Moreover, even if the other party is discharged from the hospital smoothly, he should not think of punching others with that injured hand. Chapter 121 Punishment. After Mike had dealt with a group of enthusiastic students, Captain Aaron also came over. "Mike, your strength has improved again," Aaron said in amazement. "You know, the difference between kicking someone 5 or 6 meters away and simply knocking someone away is not ordinary. Moreover, if Mike brings this kind of strength to the football field, it will definitely be another killer." Think about it, Mike was able to perform so well in the summer league when he didn't have such strong strength. Now that he has stronger strength, he is definitely likely to dominate a game by himself. Thinking of this possibility, Captain Aaron couldn't help but get excited. He asked eagerly, "Mike, have you ever thought about returning to the team? I can give you the position of captain and quarterback." Seeing the other party's enthusiasm, Mike still shook his head and refused. "Sorry, I don't plan to leave the mathematical Olympiad team yet." Hearing the answer, the disappointment on Captain Aaron's face flashed. After calming down, he said, "I respect your choice. However, I still hope that you will come back to the team when you are free." "Well, I will go to the team when I'm free," Mike responded with a smile. After getting Mike's promise, Aaron also smiled. The purpose of his coming here this time was basically completed. In Aaron's opinion, this is a good start. As long as Mike is willing to go back and take a look, there will be a chance to pull him into the team again. Then, Captain Aaron said goodbye to Mike with satisfaction with a group of football team members. Then, a group of people went to the locker room. You know, this time in order to support Mike, a group of football team members came directly to the school gate after training, and they didn't even have time to wash Here, as the students who watched the excitement left, Katie came to Mike and said worriedly, "What happened just now won't affect you, right? The previous incident caused a lot of noise. If the school really wants to investigate, Mike, as one of the parties involved, will inevitably be implicated. If you are unlucky and get a serious demerit from the school, it will have an impact on your application to university. Don't worry." Mike smiled and said, "There are so many students who can testify for me just now. It was Kemet who started it first. The most I can say is self-defense. In fact, Katie's worry was completely unnecessary. Not to mention that Mike was not afraid of not being able to apply to a good university. Even from the perspective of the school's interests, between a poor student and an excellent student, I believe Principal Tom will make the right choice." Before Katie could say anything, Mike saw a figure flashing past the corner from the corner of his eye. "Katie, wait here for a while. I have something else to take care of." After saying that, Mike chased to the side of the teaching building. Yes, the figure Mike just spotted was Regina, who was sneaking away. Because there were many strange things in the Kemet incident, Mike had reason to believe that it was the Queen Bee who was behind it. Regina, who was anxious to leave, was cursing Kemet as a waste in her heart. The other party's behavior this time not only did not make things difficult for Mike, but also made him gain momentum in front of all the students. In Regina's view, this was an unforgivable thing. While Regina lowered her head and hurried on her way, Mike had overtaken the car and stopped in front of her. "Isn't this Regina?" Mike raised the corner of his mouth slightly and said, "Where are you in a hurry to go?" In fact, Regina didn't know why she wanted to avoid Mike. Anyway, now that she was stopped by the other party, she felt a little guilty for some reason. "What do you want to do?" Regina said sternly. It's been a while since school was over. As the students who had just gathered at the school gate left, it's rare to see other students in the school now, especially on the side of the teaching building, where few people come. I have to say that Regina's choice of departure route was very clever. "What do I want to do?" Mike raised his eyebrows and said oppressively, "I should be the one asking you this. I warned you a long time ago not to mess with me." Seeing Mike's malicious look, Regina panicked. She quickly explained, "Kemet's affairs have nothing to do with me." Looking at Regina's flickering eyes, Mike stepped forward, forced her into a corner, and asked again, "Really? Why don't I believe it?" Actually, it's not wrong to say that Regina is related to the incident with Kemet, because she once hinted to the other party that she was going to cause trouble for Mike. Really Regina looked at Mike's cold face and acted even more guilty. Mike was obviously not satisfied with the other party's reaction. Then he continued to move forward and pushed Regina against the wall in the corner. Perhaps because she found that she had no way to retreat, Regina became tough instead. She showed the momentum of a queen bee and shouted, "What on earth do you want to do? Do you want to break my arm, too?" In Mike's opinion, the other party's bluffing was obviously a cover-up. But how to punish the other party made Mike feel troubled, and using force would definitely not work. "Why, you don't dare." "Then get out of the way." Regina saw that Mike didn't say anything, and she had some illusions, and her attitude gradually became arrogant. While speaking, she took the initiative to turn the tables, and moved closer to Mike, trying to force him to retreat. Check out the correct version at 1619 book bar. Feeling the softness in front of him, Mike's expression became strange. "Very good, you've successfully provoked my anger." Mike's eyes became fiery. Regina also discovered that the other party was not in the right state. Although the queen bee had not experienced the coming of age ceremony, she had an open-minded mother and she knew a lot about this. Now, she was even more aware of what Mike wanted to do. "No, not here." Regina protected herself with her arms and shrank back into the corner, looking pitiful. At the same time, the queen bee felt a strange sense of pleasure in her heart. She secretly glanced at Mike, thinking wildly, the other party is so handsome, and it seems that she is not at a disadvantage. Should she pretend to resist a few times? Or should she cooperate directly? Just when Regina closed her eyes and prepared to withstand the firepower, she found that the other party had not moved for a long time. So, she opened her eyes again and found that the scene in front of her was very different from what she thought. The fire in Mike's eyes had disappeared. Instead, He was standing not far away, staring at her with a playful face. "This is just a warning. It won't be so simple if you provoke me again next time," Mike said. Without looking at Regina's reaction, he turned and left. It was not until a long time later that Regina realized what Mike had just done to her. The feeling of being ignored made Regina feel even more angry than if she had been abused. Damn bastard Regina, who felt her charm was humiliated, was helpless and furious. On the other side, Mike successfully reunited with Katie, who was waiting at the school gate. "Mike, what did you do just now?" Katie asked curiously. "Nothing." Mike shook his head without explaining much. Then, he pulled the girl and said, "Let's go home too." So anxious. Katie had communicated with Mike for so many days and gradually understood some of the other party's hints. "There's no way. With such a beautiful woman around, I can't help but be anxious." After Mike explained, he went home together under the girl's teasing eyes. It can be imagined that tonight will be another sleepless night. Chapter 122 Big Event. As expected, the school took a cold approach to the conflict between Mike and Kenneth. The class teacher, Ms. Elizabeth, only gave Mike a mild punishment of staying in school for a week, and that was the end of it. The school's punishment was obviously intended to protect Mike. This also made his reputation even worse in the school. Now even the school's gangsters know that there is a ruthless person in the 11th grade who cannot be provoked. On the other hand, since being warned by Mike again, Regina has been jealous of Mike and Katie every day. Finally, at noon on Friday, Regina took advantage of the students' lunchtime to distribute hundreds of flyers that she had prepared to every corner of the corridor and teaching building. The content of these flyers is exactly the copy of Regina's book that records the little secrets of many people in the school. It can be imagined that, if these private little secrets spread in the school, how sensational the effect will be. Even Regina dare not bear the consequences of such behavior. So in order to clear her suspicion, the queen bee was ruthless this time and summarized a whole page of bad things about herself, mixed it in various messages, and spread it out together. Later, the students who had eaten lunch found densely scattered flyers on the ground in the corridor. After seeing the content of the flyers clearly, the corridor gradually became lively. "XXX, you are actually stealing my girl. XXX, you are a scumbag. You dare to play two boats at the same time." Oh, the hair on the principal's head turned out to be a wig. Amidst the anger and exclamations, many good sisters, good brothers or lovers in the corridor, whose secrets were exposed, instantly became enemies, and they did not hesitate to fight. Here, the little secrets spread by Regina are mainly divided into two categories. One is to expose the bad things someone has done. For example, someone has stolen someone's girl, or someone has played two boats at the same time. The other is to expose the secrets hidden in someone. For example, someone wears a wig, or someone hides his weight, etc. Of course, no matter what kind of secret it is, being exposed in public can easily lead to social death. "Mike, your head is printed on this," Lina exclaimed as she tore off a flyer from the wall of the corridor. "Most of the flyers here have someone's name, and then the bad things that person has done are recorded below. Only Mike's flyer has a color photo printed on it, and the word scumbag is written in red bold pen below, and then the words playboy and lustful are marked in small letters below. It can be said that Regina has put some thought into targeting Mike." Lina, who saw the content of the flyer clearly, turned her head and looked at Mike with a strange expression. "Lina, listen to my explanation. Mike didn't expect this to happen. No need to explain to me." Lina shook her head in relief and then pointed to the corridor as if she was trying to hold back her laughter. "You should look over there." In the chaotic corridor, there were only some students who were wrestling with each other because their secrets were exposed. There were some students who were watching the fun, and some girls also found Mike's unique flyer. They looked like they wanted to collect that special flyer separately. Damn it, Mike was anxious when he saw this, and he didn't bother to explain to Lina anymore, and rushed into the crowd. Just after Mike got back a lot of his flyers, the school management was finally alarmed. Principal Tom led a group of teachers to the scene. Coincidentally, at this time, a flyer with Principal Tom's name on it fell from the wall into his hands. After seeing the content on it, Principal Tom's face turned red with anger, and he almost threw his wig away. Tim, you quickly take people to collect these flyers. Principal Tom shouted to the Dean of Studies next to him. Oh, okay, Tim agreed with a little dazed. He also got a flyer with his own name on it, which said that he had a crush on teacher Sharon, imitating the Dean of Studies Tim. Tim Meadows looked to be in his 30s and had never had a girlfriend. It was said in the school that he didn't like women. From this point of view, this flyer is not a bad thing for him. After secretly taking a look at the expression on teacher Sharon's face, Tim led a group of physical education teachers from various subjects in the school, as well as the school security personnel, to suppress the chaotic students. More than half an hour later, Tim collected a large stack of flyers, and some students who made trouble were also controlled and stood by the wall. Seeing that the situation was suppressed, Principal Tom breathed a sigh of relief. After taking all the flyers, he whispered to Tim, "The matter here is left to you to deal with, don't make things worse." Understood. Tim nodded in understanding. Just as Principal Tom was about to leave, a team of law enforcement officers rushed into the school. "Excuse me, which one is Miss Sharon?" the fully armed law enforcement captain asked sternly. "I'm Sharon, what can I do for you?" Teacher Sharon stood up. A perfect version of the book in 16:9. "Someone suspects you of buying and hiding contraband. Please cooperate with our investigation." After the captain of the law enforcement team finished speaking, he signaled several law enforcement officers to surround teacher Sharon. At the same time, a female law enforcement officer began to search her. "What is going on?" Tim saw this and hurried to teacher Sharon's side and asked the law enforcement officer. The captain of the law enforcement team did not say much and directly took out a flyer. It was Sharon's name and what she had done. "This must be a misunderstanding. I can guarantee with my personality that teacher Sharon is not that kind of person," Tim said anxiously. Given teacher Sharon's identity, if she is really involved in contraband, the consequences will be very serious. "This is a normal process. Please do not interfere with law enforcement." The captain of the law enforcement team did not explain too much and pressed teacher Sharon, who did not know what happened, to the teacher's office. Wait. Seeing teacher Sharon being taken away, Tim's face became more anxious, and he was about to chase after her. "You stay here and deal with the students. I'll be watching over there." Principal Tom called Tim with a heavy face. Principal Tom has managed Melford Middle School very well over the years. Although he is a little old, he still has the opportunity to be promoted. Now that something like this has happened in the school, he is the most anxious. Not long after the principal left, Katie, who heard the news, also came to the scene with her two good friends, the sissy Damien and the punk girl Janice. When she learned that teacher Sharon was taken away because of rumors of contraband, Katie immediately thought of her previous behavior. She realized that it was probably because of what she had said unintentionally before that implicated teacher Sharon. At this time, the law enforcement team who went to the office to search also escorted teacher Sharon back. "How is it going?" Tim hurriedly asked. Teacher Sharon also understood what happened at this time. Her face was much worse than when she left before. In response to Tim's questioning, teacher Sharon just shook her head and seemed to be in a bad mood. It is easy to imagine that no teacher would be in a good mood if they were reported by their students for hiding contraband. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 123, Barriers to Trust. Good news, the law enforcement team did not find any contraband in teacher Sharon's office. Bad news, teacher Sharon still failed to prove her innocence, and the law enforcement team had to continue to search her home. Seeing that teacher Sharon was about to be escorted out of the school, Katie hurried over and shouted, "Teacher Sharon is innocent. I can prove it to her." However, the same sentence, "The incident has already happened, and only after a thorough investigation can the person involved be cleared of innocence. Please don't hinder our law enforcement." The law enforcement captain gave another stern warning and led the team to escort teacher Sharon out of the school. How could this happen? Katie, who realized the seriousness of the problem, became dazed. The punk girl next to her saw that Katie's mood was not right, thought about it, and asked uncertainly, "Katie, did you do this?" Katie thought that it was indeed she who spread the news that teacher Sharon had contraband first, and she didn't know how to answer for a while. How could you spread everyone's secrets to deal with Regina? The punk girl Janice looked incredible, and there was disappointment in her tone. Janice had heard Katie mention before that Regina had a notebook that recorded the secrets of many people in the school. At this moment, she obviously misunderstood and thought that Katie deliberately spread the secrets in the notebook in order to continue to deal with Regina. "No, I didn't do the flyer thing." Katie, who was feeling guilty, also found that her friend misunderstood her. Since getting together with Mike, Katie has extinguished the idea of continuing to deal with Regina. So, she explained, "Mike once told me that blindly belittling others will not make you look noble. So, I don't plan to deal with Regina anymore." As she said that, Katie also glanced at Mike, who had a heavy face not far away. In just a short while, Mike collected more than 20 flyers with his own portrait printed on them, and it is unknown how many were hidden by others. It can be said that Regina's behavior against Mike this time was very successful. So, even if Lina was around to comfort him, Mike's mood would not improve. Of course, there are many people who are in a worse mood than Mike now, and Tim is one of them. Tim's face became worse and worse as he listened to his classmates whispering about teacher Sharon and the contraband. Finally, the Dean of Studies, who was in his 30s and had never had a girlfriend, punched the fire hydrant in the corridor. The huge noise made the students quiet down. "Teacher Sharon's matter has not been settled yet. Please don't discuss it casually," Tim shouted with an ugly face. It can be predicted that, even if teacher Sharon's contraband is not true this time, her reputation will still be greatly hit. This is also the reason why Tim was in a bad mood. After venting his anger, Tim soon found that there were timid girls with fear on their faces. Knowing that he had lost his temper, Tim suppressed his irritability and said, "Students whose names are on the flyers, please gather in the conference room. I have something to say to you later." After thinking about it, Tim realized that, while the students whose names are on the flyers are victims, it is very likely that the real murderer is also hidden among them. After all, sometimes the brain circuits of high school students are so strange. So, Tim gathered these people together, and also wanted to see if he could interrogate the truth. As the victimized students left one by one, Mike also said goodbye to Lina, and went to the conference room with Katie, Karen, Gretchen and others. Yes, all the members of the Devil Body group were on the list this time. Regina followed Mike with mixed feelings as she watched him leave. After the victims left, the corridor was almost empty. Tim said to the remaining students seriously, "I don't want to hear any rumors in school before the matter is resolved. Do you understand?" The dean's authority was still useful, and the students who stayed nodded obediently. It was the limit of Tim's ability to suppress the matter temporarily. On the other side, there were more than 100 people gathered in the conference room. Except for Mike, the others were all 12th grade students. Moreover, more than 80% of these people were girls. After all, Regina could easily collect information about girls. At this moment, the best girlfriends and friends of the past had become enemies because of the leak of secrets. Therefore, in the huge conference room, there were quarrels from time to time. Janice, the punk girl who sat with Mike and others, believed that Katie was not the real murderer, and then looked at Karen and Gretchen. In the minds of the punk girls, who had the best chance of completing this feat, it must be the girls in the Devil Body group. Karen and Gretchen quickly understood the consciousness of Janice, the punk girl, so they shook their heads. Then, everyone's eyes turned to Regina, who was sitting alone in the back row. There were only a few people in the Devil Body group. Using the elimination method, the real murderer naturally stood out. A correct version in the 16-9 book and 1 bar. Facing the scrutiny of everyone, Regina put on a disdainful expression, still looking beautiful alone. Damn little bitch, I knew it was her. Janice, the punk girl, had an old grudge against Regina, and she couldn't sit still. Calm down, Janice. Sissy Damien held his friend and persuaded him, we have no evidence to prove that she did it. Indeed, in the current situation, even if Janice questioned Regina, she would not admit it. On the contrary, this behavior might lead to the anger of the other members of the devil body group. Looking at Katie, who was still blaming herself, Janice softened her tone and said, "Is it so easy for that little bitch? Of course not. We can collect evidence privately and then expose the other party's true face." Sissy Damien comforted his friend. On the other side, Mike, who had calmed down, was also sure that it was definitely Regina who targeted him this time. Thinking that this happened not long after he warned the other party, Mike's face became more and more ugly. While the big meeting room was noisy, Tim walked in with a baseball bat. After entering, he put down his coat first, then tapped his hands with a baseball bat, and his eyes scanned the students. After all the students had quieted down, Tim spoke up and said, "I know some of you are innocent. However, I want to say that the person who knows you so well must be your friend. Therefore, the real murderer this time is likely to be one of you." As Tim spoke, a seed of suspicion took root in the hearts of the students who still did not know what was going on. So, the students looked at the people around them with suspicion. "Well, I don't want to say more." Tim threw the baseball bat aside to show that he had no ill intentions and continued, "Whoever did this, come forward. I promise that the truth will not be spread out of this classroom." Obviously, Tim lied to the students in order to find out the real murderer who framed teacher Sharon as soon as possible. There are so many victims here. If the real murderer really comes forward, the result may not be good. Of course, Regina would not be so stupid. She also pretended to be innocent at this time, looking around as if she was helping to find the real murderer. No one is willing to admit it. Tim waited for a long time, but no one came forward. So, he curled his lips, walked to the podium in front, pulled a chair and sat down. "Then I will wait and see. If the real murderer is not found today, no one can leave here." Seeing Tim's strong appearance, the students below began to discuss again. This time, they looked more uneasy. Chapter 124, Barriers to Trust, continued. Time went on until the afternoon when school was over, but Tim, who was sitting at the front, still had no intention of letting anyone leave. At this point, the students below were really anxious. You know, today is Friday, and if they continue to be delayed here, they may lose their happy weekend time. So, in order to quickly end this bad experience, many people began to spontaneously look for the real murderer. Just as everyone was arguing again to find the real murderer, the door of the conference room was pushed open, and teacher Sharon, who had been taken away before, walked in. "Teacher Sharon, is your problem solved?" Tim quickly went up to her. Teacher Sharon's temperament was a little colder than when she left. Hearing the question, she nodded slightly. "I knew, Teacher Sharon, you will be fine." After getting the other party's affirmative answer, Tim breathed a sigh of relief, and the big stone in his heart finally fell to the ground. Then, with Tim's concern, Teacher Sharon looked at the students below and asked, "What's the situation here?" After Tim told her about the situation here, Teacher Sharon frowned slightly and said, "Let's stop here." As mentioned earlier, although Teacher Sharon looks very old-fashioned and unkind, she is not that harsh on her students. Now that the misunderstanding about her has been resolved, she is not going to embarrass others. How can this be? Tim still wanted to speak up for Teacher Sharon. As a result, when he saw the other party's calm eyes looking at him, he compromised. "Okay, I understand." Thanks to Teacher Sharon's safe return, Tim felt much better. Otherwise, the students who were left behind might have to suffer for a while. Tim, who understood Teacher Sharon's intentions, walked in front of the students and saw that everyone was suspicious of each other. So, he said, "Be quiet." After everyone quieted down, he continued, "It seems that the real culprit of this incident is not among you. But I still want to say one thing. Those who can come here prove that you all have guilty consciences. So, if you don't mind, I would like to play a game with you next, a small game about trust. You can also take this opportunity to speak your true feelings here. Before, because of what happened today, everyone's hearts inevitably had a gap. If this situation continues, it will not be good for everyone. Now, Tim is using a small game of speaking the truth to help everyone rebuild a bridge of mutual trust." After talking about his plan, Tim moved the desk and climbed up. After inviting the students to come closer, Tim seemed to have given it all and said loudly, "I admit that I like Teacher Sharon. So what? Everyone has the right to pursue happiness. Hearing Tim really speak his true feelings directly, the students around were surprised at first, and then cheered for him. Teacher Sharon, who was at the outermost of the crowd, saw Tim's burning eyes, and was a little flustered, then turned his face to the side. Seeing Teacher Sharon's reaction, Tim smiled. Then, he turned his back to the students, opened his arms, and shouted, "I'm here!" Amid a burst of exclamations, Tim fell off the table without any protection. Fortunately, Mike was quick-witted and strong enough to hold up the dean. Tim stood up again, smiled and patted Mike's arm, and said with satisfaction, "You are very good. Next, you go up and demonstrate to everyone again. Don't worry, I will catch you." Tim also hammered his chest to show that he is very reliable. The key to this little game of trust is to entrust your back and safety to others. Mike didn't expect that he would be drafted, but the atmosphere had been set here, and he also stood on the table happily, looking at Katie, Karen, Gretchen and others who gathered around. Mike said, "I admit that I'm a little selfish. I want to give happiness to everyone I love. But what's wrong with that?" The scene was quiet for a while, and then the boys laughed knowingly. Then, the girls cheered enthusiastically. In the eyes of the girls, Mike's fickleness is not wrong. Who doesn't want to find a boyfriend as handsome as Mike? Even if you can't have him, it's good to have some thoughts. And Tim and the crowd, after understanding what Mike said, showed a surprised look on his face. Probably the kind of expression of "you city people really know how to have fun." However, before he could have more feelings, he was squeezed aside by the crazy girls. Above the table, Mike, who had made a sincere declaration, turned around and fell backwards. Then, he seemed to fall into the waves and swim in the dense sea of people. Seeing that Mike was protected by Katie and others, and went to the side, Tim stood up again and shouted to the enthusiastic crowd, "It's still game time. Who's going next?" After 2 rounds of demonstrations, the students also roughly knew how to play this game about trust. There is no wrong version in the 16-9 book bar. "I'll do it." Janice, a punk girl, who felt that this game was quite interesting, squeezed through the crowd and climbed onto the table. When she got to the table, she didn't rush to speak, but stared meaningfully at the Queen Bee. Regina hiding aside. Many people knew that the two had a grudge. Now there were even some people waiting to see what Janice would do. "I admit that I like girls a little more than boys." Janice's opening words caused cheers from the crowd. Then, she stared at Regina again and shouted, "So, Regina, I love you so much." After a mental struggle, Janice finally had no choice but to reveal the true face of the Queen Bee here. Janice, who seemed to have vented her anger, turned around and jumped into the crowd with a backflip. "Janice, you should try to lose weight." From the crowd, the sissy Damien's weak protest came. Looking around, Janice was sitting on Damien, using him as a cushion. Amid the laughter of the crowd, Katie quietly climbed onto the table. "First of all, I want to say sorry to Regina. Even though she has a sarcastic and domineering personality and likes to say bad things about others behind their backs." Katie said a lot of things, as if publicly punishing Regina. Regina, who was on the periphery of the crowd, looked uglier and uglier. But soon, Katie changed the subject. "I admit that, in order to fit in with the Devil Body group, I have imitated all of Regina's shortcomings. So, I want to say sorry to everyone." Katie's true feelings also won her a round of applause. Just when everyone thought she had finished speaking, Katie continued, "Secondly, I want to apologize to Teacher Sharon. I shouldn't have spread the rumor about her and the contraband. If you were to say what the most thrilling thing was today, it must be that Teacher Sharon was taken away for questioning." At this time, after finding the real culprit who framed Teacher Sharon, the scene suddenly became quiet, and many students looked at the other party involved in the incident. Chapter 125 Apology. Sure enough, after hearing Katie's confession, Teacher Sharon's face showed deep disappointment. You know, when Katie first came to school, it was Teacher Sharon who first expressed goodwill to her. Moreover, in the subsequent study and life, Teacher Sharon also took care of Katie. For example, Katie's joining the mathematical Olympiad team was the result of Teacher Sharon's efforts. Now Teacher Sharon's state can be said to be, the more you give, the deeper you get hurt. On the other hand, Katie, who spoke the truth, seemed to have unloaded a burden. However, when she saw teacher Sharon's face, her expression froze. Knowing that the other party had not forgiven her, Katie did not dare to ask for more. She turned around and said I'm sorry silently, then fell backwards with her eyes closed. Are you okay? Mike, who was holding the girl, saw that the other party was in a bad mood and asked with concern. Seeing that Mike did not hate her because of what she had done, Katie felt a little relieved. However, when she saw teacher Sharon, who was still disappointed, her mood became heavy again. Katie, who didn't know how to deal with her relationship with teacher Sharon, shook her head blankly. On the other side, the trust game was still going on. As the students climbed up the table one by one and spoke their minds, the cheers on the scene never stopped. In this atmosphere where emotion outweighs rationality, the gap between the students before also showed a tendency to be repaired. Then, Karen and Gretchen climbed up the table one after another, and both mentioned Regina tactfully. If Regina was willing to go on stage and speak her truth boldly at this time, she would most likely win the friendship of the two team members again. But until the end of the game, Regina chose to stand aside and watch coldly. This game does not require everyone to participate. People who have unspeakable secrets and have a clear conscience will naturally not go on stage. When no one went up to the table, Tim stood up and called everyone together again, saying, I saw that many people had a lot of fun playing this game, and it also achieved the effect I wanted. This is great. Tim's words made many people smile knowingly. His face became more serious, and he continued, I hope this matter ends here. Please keep what happened here confidential. After everyone nodded, Tim smiled and said, okay, everyone can leave. I wish you a happy weekend. After the previous small game, the students felt much closer to Tim, the dean of teaching. So, when leaving, many people came to greet him and looked back and forth between him and teacher Sharon. The meaning seemed to be encouraging Tim to pursue his own happiness. When everyone walked out of the conference room, other students in the school had already left the school. Katie, wait for me at the school gate for a while. I will find you soon. Mike looked at the direction where Regina left and said to Katie, oh, okay. Katie was still thinking about teacher Sharon and didn't notice that Mike's face was wrong. Yes, Mike, who confirmed that Regina was still targeting him, has now completely set his sights on her. If you do something bad here, you will naturally be punished. Regina on the other side seemed to be waiting for Mike as well. When she found that he was following her, she took many turns and finally went to the rooftop of the school. How are you going to explain this time? Mike asked jokingly, looking at Regina standing on the edge of the rooftop, approaching and approaching. This is the last time. The sunset shone on Regina's face, revealing a blush. What? Mike looked at Regina's relieved look and didn't understand what she meant. But soon, Mike saw Regina kneeling in front of him. What are you doing? Mike was surprised and vaguely guessed her intention. Isn't this what you want? Regina looked up with a complicated expression, glared at Mike, and started her performance. Half an hour later, Mike was sweating in the cold wind on the rooftop. As a gentleman, Mike had no reason to refuse the way the other party chose to apologize. On the contrary, due to Regina's previous actions, Mike didn't care about being gentle with her after taking the initiative. After more than 10 minutes, Mike's mood became calm. Charm attribute plus 25, flexibility attribute plus 5, physique main attribute plus 1, voice, country code 10. After counting the light balls this time, Mike looked at Regina, who was wiping the corner of her mouth, and asked, tell me, what do you want to do? Shouldn't I ask you this question now? Regina said hoarsely with a blush on her face. Regina, who had put in a lot of effort, felt that she should take the initiative. Looking at the faint smile on Regina's face, Mike couldn't turn his face and deny her immediately. A correct version of the book in 1619. After thinking for a while, he said, let's just forget about this matter. Don't mess with me and Katie again in the future. Without using force, this is the best way Mike can think of. As for using public opinion to attack the other party, he still disdains to do so. Seeing Mike preparing to leave, Regina shouted, wait, what? There's something else. Mike stopped. Although the two had a relationship, in Mike's heart, Regina was still not as good as Katie and the others. I want to return to the Devil Body group. Regina made her request. "This is your business, it has nothing to do with me," Mike said. "As long as you agree." Regina smiled and continued, "Also, if you want next time, you can always come to me." Looking at the expression on Regina's face, she seemed to be completely relaxed. Moreover, it was hard to say who would suffer in this rooftop activity. Judging from Regina's performance before and after, Mike had reason to suspect that she had been spying on him for a long time. After taking another serious look at Regina, Mike turned and went down the rooftop. If the other party didn't have so many tricks, she would be a good communication partner. After all, the queen bee was so popular and had her own unique features. At least in Mike's opinion, the other party must be very talented in a musical instrument. When Mike arrived at the school gate, nearly an hour had passed. "Mike, you are finally here," I thought. Katie, who was in a nervous mood, saw Mike coming and quickly threw herself into his arms. Katie spent nearly an hour thinking a lot at the school gate. Part of it was that she was worried that Mike would abandon her after knowing what she had done. "What do you think?" Mike asked. "Nothing." Katie wrinkled her nose and said, "Let's go home." Katie's parents had been away for a week, and tomorrow would probably be the day they would be back, so there wasn't much time left for the two of them to be free. Katie, feeling depressed, decided to go crazy tonight. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.